Story 1. This story is titled, After Coming Back from a Girl's Trip. My fiance asked for an open relationship. I kicked her out. Hey everyone, we put a lot of time and effort into finding these stories to keep bringing you the best content. If you enjoy what we do, it would mean the world if you hit that subscribe button. Your support really makes all the difference and keeps this journey going strong. Thanks so much for being here with me. Now let's start the video. OP starts by saying, Hi all, I'm not sure if I'm overreacting here, so let me know what you think. Alright, so here's how it all started. My fiancé, 27 female, now ex-fiancé, and I, 28 male, been together for 5 years, and for the most part, things were good, or at least I thought they were. We met in college during our sophomore year, and everything just clicked. She was smart, funny, and had this energy about her that made you want to be around her. We started off as friends, but it didn't take long for things to get more serious. Fast forward a few years, and we were living together, sharing bills, planning a future. Getting engaged felt like the natural next step, and when I proposed last year, she said yes without hesitation. We'd even started talking about buying a house and having kids someday. That's what made this whole situation so hard to process. I wasn't just losing my fiancé, I was losing the life we'd been building together. Just got back from this big girls' trip with her friends. She was gone for about a week, and everything seemed fine before she left. She was excited, making plans, talking about all the stuff they were going to do. I was happy for her, even encouraged her to go and have a good time. She works hard, and I figured a break would do her good. When she got back, though, something felt off. I'm not sure how to describe it exactly, but it was like she wasn't fully there. You know when someone's physically present but their mind is somewhere else? That's what it felt like. Normally, after we've been apart for a few days, she'd greet me with a big smile and a hug, and she'd be eager to share every detail about her trip. But this time, she barely said a word. I asked her how it went, and she just shrugged and said, "It was fine." Then she walked past me and went straight to the bedroom, leaving her suitcase by the door. I ignored it, thinking maybe she was just tired, but even that night, when we were eating dinner, she barely touched her food and spent most of the time scrolling on her phone. It wasn't like her at all. Over the next couple of days, though, her behavior got weirder. She was on her phone a lot, like constantly. She'd never been the type to obsess over her phone before, so that stood out to me. Then there was the way she started acting around me. She'd avoid eye contact, seemed distracted when we talked, and even the physical affection just wasn't there. I'm not saying we were all over each other 24/7, but we were always pretty affectionate. Suddenly, it was like there was this invisible wall between us. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was up. I decided to give her some space, thinking maybe she'd snap out of it. Relationships aren't perfect, and I figured if I backed off a bit, she'd open up when she was ready. But that was not what happened. Instead, the distance between us only got worse. So I tried bringing it up one night after dinner, asking if something was bothering her, or if there was something on her mind. She didn't bother, saying everything was fine, and that I was overthinking things. But her tone? It didn't match her words. It was like she was trying to convince herself more than me. I let it go, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. 5 years together, and you start to pick up on these things. I didn't want to push too hard, but man, it was eating at me. What was going on? Why was she acting like this? A few more days passed, and I started to notice patterns. She'd get texts late at night and would flip her phone over when I walked into the room. I'm not the kind of guy who snoops or accuses without proof, but this wasn't normal. I thought about confronting her, but I didn't want to come across as paranoid. Instead, I tried to focus on work and keep myself busy. I figured if there was something going on, she'd eventually tell me. Boy, was I in for a surprise. Looking back now, I think I knew something big was coming, but I just didn't know what. One night, she came home from work and said she wanted to talk. My heart sank immediately because, let's be real, nothing good ever starts with, "We need to talk." I sat down, trying to play it cool, but my mind was racing. What could it be? Did I do something wrong? So there we were, sitting on the couch. I could feel the tension in the air. She was fidgeting, playing with her hands, and avoiding eye contact. That's when she hit me with it. "I've been thinking a lot about our relationship lately," she said, her voice calm but a little too careful. I raised an eyebrow. "Okay, thinking about what exactly?" "Just, how we could make it better," she said, finally looking up at me. "Better?" I asked, leaning back. "What's wrong with it now?" She hesitated for a moment, biting her lip. "Nothing's wrong," she said quickly. "I mean, things are great. But when I was on the trip, some of the girls opened up about their relationships. They talked about how happy they are because they've found ways to give each other more freedom and trust. I blinked, trying to process what she was saying. Freedom and trust? I repeated, confused. What does that even mean? She was twisting her hands nervously in her lap. Her voice was calm, almost too calm, like she was trying to convince herself this was a normal conversation. She wouldn't look me in the eye, though. Instead, she kept glancing at the wall behind me, like she was afraid of what she'd see if she actually looked at my face. It was the way she said it, too. So rehearsed, like she'd practiced the speech in her head a dozen times before saying it out loud. That made it feel even worse, like this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thought. She'd been planning this. She took a deep breath, like she was bracing herself for something big, and then she said it. I think we should try an open relationship. I swear my brain short-circuited for a second. I just stared at her, trying to process what she'd just said. Wait, what? I finally managed to get out, my voice louder than I intended. She looked at me, her face dead serious. I've been thinking about it for a while now, she said, her words deliberate, like she was trying to convince both of us. I think it could be good for us. I just sat there, staring at her, trying to process. An open relationship? Are you serious right now? Yes, she said, her tone calm but firm. It's not as crazy as it sounds. A lot of people are doing it, and it works for them. It's about trust and being honest with each other. Trust? My voice rising. How does bringing other people into our relationship have anything to do with trust? Where is this even coming from? She sighed, running a hand through her hair. Look, I know it's a lot to take in, but I talked to some of the girls on the trip, and they shared their experiences. They're happier now. They said it's brought them closer to their partners. I shook my head, completely floored. And you thought, what? That I'd just jump on board with this? That I'd be okay with it? Her face softened, like she was trying to be patient. I didn't say you had to decide right away. I just think it's something we should consider. We've been together for so long, and I want to make sure we're still growing, not getting stuck. I tried to catch myself feeling a knot tighten in my chest. So now you think we're stuck? After 5 years together? You think the solution is, what? Sleeping with other people? She flinched at my words but didn't back down. It's not just about that. It's about exploring who we are as individuals while still being together. It doesn't mean I don't love you. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there feeling miserable. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. 5 years. 5 damn years of building a life together, and now she wanted to throw it all like this? We'd never even talked about open relationships before. It wasn't part of who we were or what we wanted, at least as far as I knew. I asked her where this was coming from. Was she unhappy? Did she feel like something was missing in our relationship? She said no, she loved me and our relationship was great. She just thought this could be a way to make it even better. That didn't make any sense to me. If things were great, why would she want to mess with them? I told her that, and her response was, it's not messing with it. It's evolving it. I'm not gonna lie, that pissed me off. Evolving? This isn't a Pokemon. This is our relationship. I leaned forward, narrowing my eyes. Is this about someone specific? Did you meet someone on the trip? Her head snapped up and she looked almost offended. What? Oh, of course not, she said quickly, shaking her head. You're sure? I pressed, studying her face. Because this is coming out of nowhere, and it's starting to feel like there's more to this than what you're saying. I swear, she said, her voice a little higher than usual. There's no one else. I didn't meet anyone, and this isn't about that. It's something I've been thinking about, that's all. I leaned back, crossing my arms. You swear there's no one else? I repeated, watching her carefully. She nodded, her expression tight. Yes, I swear. This isn't about anyone else. It's about us. I told her I needed time to think. I didn't even know what to say at that moment. I went into the bedroom and just sat there for a while, staring at the wall. My thoughts were all over the place. Was this real? Was she serious? Did I even know her anymore? After about an hour, I came back out. She was still sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. I stood there for a second, then said, I can't do this. She finally looked up at me, her face calm. What do you mean? I mean, I can't do an open relationship. I'm not interested, and I don't think I ever will be, I said, my voice steady. She set her phone down on the coffee table and crossed her arms. Well, she said slowly, maybe we should take some time to figure out if we're still on the same page about what we want. That was it for me. I stared at her, trying to process how she could be so casual about this. 5 years, I said, my voice shaking slightly. We've been together for 5 years, and this is what you have to say? Like it's no big deal? Her face changed then, like she was starting to realize how serious I was. I didn't mean it like that, she said quickly. I just think we need to talk about what we want for the future. There's nothing to talk about, I said firmly. If you want an open relationship, then you're not the person I thought you were. And I'm not going to sit here while you dismantle everything we've built just because your friends got into your head. She sat there, stunned for a moment. You're seriously kicking me out over this? She asked, her voice breaking. Yes, I said, staring her down. Pack your things and leave. Her eyes filled with tears, and she started crying. I didn't mean for it to go like this, she sobbed. I just wanted to have a conversation about it. That's all. I didn't mean to hurt you. There's nothing left to say, I told her. This isn't a conversation I ever wanted to have. I can't do this, and I won't. She wiped at her face, sniffling as she got up and headed to the bedroom to pack a bag. I didn't follow her or say anything else. A few minutes later, she came out, her bag slung over her shoulder, and stopped at the door. Is this really it? She asked softly. It is, I said, not looking at her. She hesitated, then opened the door and walked out. I sat down on the couch, staring at the empty space where her things used to be, and felt like my whole world had just imploded. I kept asking myself how we had gotten to this point, but no matter how many times I replayed it in my head, I couldn't find an answer that made sense. That was the beginning of the end. The night she left, the apartment felt so empty. Her things were still here. Her clothes, her toiletries, all the little knickknacks she liked to scatter around. But she was gone, and it hit me hard. 5 years of being together, building a life, planning a future, and in one conversation, it all just crumbled. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I groggily grabbed it off the nightstand, and her name was everywhere. Texts, missed calls, voicemails. I sighed, scrolling through the messages. Please, can we just talk? One text read. Another one said, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just want to explain. The voicemails were more of the same when I played a snippet of one. Hey, I know you're mad, and you have every right to be. But please, just give me a chance to talk to you. I need to explain. I can't lose you like this. Then her friends started calling me. Apparently, they'd gotten wind of what happened, and they were all tripping over themselves to apologize. They claimed it was their fault, that they'd been hyping up the idea of open relationships during the trip, and she just got carried away. One of them even said, we didn't think she'd actually bring it up to you. Like that made it better. I told them to get away with it and back off. I wasn't interested in hearing excuses or justifications from her friends. What pissed me off the most was that she let them influence her like that. If she was so easily swayed by her friends, what else could they talk her into? My family was furious when I told them. My mom kept saying, you dodged a bullet. My dad, who doesn't usually get involved in my personal life, said I did the right thing by standing my ground. That support meant a lot because I was already second-guessing myself. Her family, on the other hand, was a different story. Her mom called me saying I should give her another chance and that she was just confused. Her dad tried to guilt me saying, you're throwing away a beautiful relationship over a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? She asked to sleep with other people, bluntly. How is that a misunderstanding? The worst part, though, was some of our mutual friends. A couple of them tried to make me feel like I'd overreacted. One even said, she was just being honest about what she wants. Isn't that a good thing? Yeah, honesty is great, but there's a difference between being honest and blindsiding your fiancé with something that completely goes against everything you've built together. One friend, let's call him Dave, really got under my skin. He kept telling me I was being old-fashioned and that I needed to be more open-minded. He even said, it's 2024, man. Relationships aren't black and white anymore. I couldn't believe he was defending her, especially since he'd seen what I was going through. Then there was Anna, one of her closer friends, who let it slip that my ex had been talking about the idea of an open relationship before the trip. It seems that she'd brought it up as a joke during a group hangout a few months ago, and everyone just laughed it off. That made me feel even worse, like I'd been left in the dark while she'd been testing the waters for a while now. I spent the next few days trying to figure out what to do. She kept calling and texting, begging me to meet her and talk things through. Part of me wanted to hear her out, but the other part of me was still so angry and hurt. How do you come back from something like this? How do you trust someone who can so casually throw a grenade into your relationship? For a few days, I felt stuck in this weird limbo. On one hand, I didn't want to see her or hear her excuses. On the other hand, the idea of not getting any answers was eating away at me. What if there was more to the story? What if she'd been lying about everything, even before the open relationship thing? I remember pacing back and forth in my living room one night, going over it in my head. I even considered calling her, but every time I picked up my phone, I stopped myself. In the end, it was a couple of close friends who convinced me to meet her. You need closure, one of them said. Otherwise, this will keep eating at you. And as much as I didn't want to admit it, they were right. Eventually, I decided I needed closure. I agreed to meet her, mostly because I wanted to see if she'd come clean about what was really going on. Something was telling me there was more to the story, and I needed answers. We set up a time to meet at a cafe. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for. Maybe some kind of explanation that made sense, or at least an apology that felt genuine. But I wasn't prepared for what I was about to find out. I showed up to the cafe about 10 minutes early. I wanted to get there first, find a spot, and mentally prepare myself for whatever she was going to say. I was nervous, but mostly I just wanted it over with. She walked in right on time, looking like she hadn't slept much. Her hair was a little messy, her makeup was minimal, and she looked stressed. I'll admit, a small part of me felt bad for her, but I reminded myself why we were there. She sat down across from me, and for a few seconds, we just stared at each other. Then, she started talking. She apologized right away, saying she'd handled everything wrong and never meant to hurt me. She said the idea of an open relationship wasn't something she'd been planning for a long time. It was something her friends brought up during the trip, and she got caught up in their excitement. She claimed it was just a what-if scenario, something she thought we could talk about, not something she was serious about pursuing. I never wanted to hurt you, she kept saying. I just wanted to explore the idea together. I told her that if she really valued our relationship, she wouldn't have dropped something like that on me out of nowhere. She would have talked to me first, not waited until after some girls' trip where she clearly got influenced by her friends. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes, and said she understood. She looked genuinely upset, but I still wasn't buying it. Something about her explanation didn't add up. That's when I decided to ask her something I hadn't planned on asking. Can I see your phone? Her face went pale. I'll never forget that look. She hesitated for a second, but then handed it over, probably thinking I wouldn't actually go through with checking it. I'm not the kind of guy who normally does stuff like that. I've never felt the need to invade someone's privacy. But this time, I couldn't ignore my gut feeling. As I sat there holding her phone, my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. Part of me didn't want to do it. What if I found something that would completely change the way I saw her? But another part of me, the part that couldn't shake the gut feeling that something was wrong, needed to know. My hands were shaking. I opened her messages, and it didn't take long to find what I was looking for. There it was. A conversation with some guy I didn't recognize. They'd been chatting for a while, and from what I read, it was clear this wasn't just friendly banter. There were flirty messages, late-night texts, and even a couple of suggestive comments about seeing where things go. The first message that caught my eye was from some guy I didn't recognize. They'd been chatting back and forth, and it wasn't just friendly small talk. His messages were flirty, calling her things like babe and cutie, and she wasn't shutting it down. Instead, she was encouraging it, responding with laughing emojis and saying things like, "You're too much," one message from him said. "Can't wait to see you again." I was disgusted. That's all I needed to see. This wasn't just her thinking about an open relationship. She'd already started exploring it. I put the phone down and looked at her. She was already crying, mumbling something about how it wasn't what it looked like, and that it was just talking. I told her to stop. There was no point in lying anymore. "So this open relationship idea wasn't just an idea, was it?" I asked. "You were already testing it out." She flinched, her breath hitching. "No, it wasn't like that," she said quickly, her words tumbling over each other. I was just talking to him. That's all. It wasn't serious. It was a mistake, okay? A stupid mistake." "A mistake?" My voice rising. "You were talking to him, flirting with him, making plans with him, and you expect me to believe it was just a mistake?" "It was!" she cried. "I didn't mean for it to go anywhere. I was just curious. I love you, and I don't want to lose you." I looked at her, full of anger. "You already lost me," I said flatly. "The second you thought it was okay to bring someone else into us, you lost me. Please," she begged. "Please don't end this over one stupid mistake. I'll do anything to fix this." I stood there for a moment, watching her break down, but the anger in my chest didn't fade. "You made your choice," I said quietly, "and I'm making mine. We're done." I stayed calm because we were in public, but inside I was furious. The fact that she even entertained the idea while we were engaged was enough for me to walk away. She kept apologizing, but I didn't want to hear it. I stood up, told her I was done, and left the cafe. As I walked away, I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, sadness, relief, and even a little bit of clarity. I watched her as she sat there crying, trying to explain herself. It wasn't the kind of tears that felt sincere, though. It was like she was panicking, scrambling to fix a situation she'd lost control of. Her words felt rehearsed, like she was trying to say all the right things to make me forgive her. "It was just talking," she kept repeating, but her tone didn't match her words. There was no real regret in her voice, just fear. Fear of the consequences, fear of being alone, fear of losing the comfort of what we had. And as I looked at her, I realized I couldn't do this anymore. No matter what she said, the damage was done. For the first time in weeks, I knew exactly where I stood. I wasn't going to let her drag me through the mud or play games with my emotions. Whatever we had, it was over. After that meeting at the cafe, I thought that would be the last of it. I blocked her number that same night and deleted her from every social media platform. I didn't want to see her, hear from her, or even know what she was doing. I was done. For a few days, I had peace. She didn't try to reach out, and I finally started to feel like I could move on. Then, out of nowhere, our mutual friends started texting me. They'd heard what happened at the cafe, and most of them were reaching out to apologize. I guess word got around about the guy she was talking to, and suddenly, people who'd been defending her before were switching sides. One of her friends told me she'd started dating the guy right after our breakup. I wasn't surprised. It was obvious at this point that she'd been lining him up in the background. What did catch me off guard, though, was how quickly things went south for her. Apparently, she was posting pictures of him on social media, trying to make it look like they were some perfect new couple. Mutual friends said it came off as forced, like she was trying too hard to prove something. One of her captions was something like, "When you find someone who truly understands you," which felt like a dig at me. But the funny thing was, people weren't buying it. A couple of friends even told me she blocked them after they called her out for moving on so fast. Then, just a week later, the posts stopped. No more pictures, no more cute captions, just radio silence. That's when word started spreading that he'd ghosted her, and she was losing it. She was telling people how he led her on and used her, but honestly, I wasn't surprised. It was like karma showed up to collect, and she had no idea how to handle it. When I heard about this, I didn't feel bad for her. Call it petty, but it felt like karma doing its thing. You can't treat people the way she treated me and expect everything to work out perfectly. Life doesn't work like that. Some of our mutual friends started cutting ties with her after that. They said she'd been acting toxic, spreading lies about me, and playing the victim. She was telling people I was manipulative and didn't value her, which was complete BS. Luckily, most of our friends saw through it, especially when they found out she'd hooked up with someone else literally the day after our breakup. It's wild how quickly people turn when the truth comes out. A couple of the same friends who'd told me I'd overreacted were now apologizing left and right. They admitted they were wrong to doubt me and said they didn't realize how messed up the situation really was. I told them it was fine, but honestly, it felt good to have their support again. As for her, she tried calling me from different numbers after I blocked her. I guess when the guy ghosted her, she started rethinking things and decided she wanted me back. She left me a voicemail saying she was ready to work things out and that she realized how much she loved me. I didn't respond. I didn't even think about responding. By then, I was completely over it. The person I thought she was and the person she turned out to be were two very different people, and there was no going back. After everything that went down, cutting ties wasn't just about technology. It was about fully removing her from my life, both physically and mentally. I pack up the rest of her stuff. She'd taken the essentials the night she left, but a lot of her things were still scattered around the apartment. Clothes in the closet, toiletries in the bathroom, random little things like her favorite coffee mug, and some books she always kept on the nightstand. Packing it all up was weirdly emotional. Every item felt like a reminder of the life we'd built together, and for a moment, I wondered if I was being too harsh. But then I'd think back to the cafe, to the messages I'd read on her phone, and any second-guessing disappeared. I texted her from a burner number, one she didn't have saved, and told her to pick up her stuff by the end of the week or it was going to Goodwill. She showed up 2 days later, looking like she'd been crying. I didn't let her inside. I handed her the boxes at the door, said goodbye, and closed it. She didn't argue, didn't try to push her way in. She just stood there for a second, like she wanted to say something, then left. That was the last time I saw her in person. After that, there were still loose ends to tie up. She and I had a few mutual subscriptions and shared accounts, so I went through everything and canceled or changed the passwords. Netflix, Spotify, even the utility bills. Anything that connected us had to go. I wasn't trying to be petty. I just wanted a clean slate. The hardest part was dealing with mutual friends. Some of them had already cut ties with her after everything came out, but others were still trying to stay neutral. I get it. They didn't want to pick sides. But for me, there was no middle ground. If you were still hanging out with her after all this, I didn't want you in my life. I told a few people outright that I wasn't comfortable staying friends if they were still close with her. Most of them understood, but a couple of people acted like I was being dramatic. You can't just erase 5 years like it never happened, one friend said. But that's exactly what I needed to do. One by one, I started trimming down my circle. It wasn't about punishing anyone. It was about protecting myself. I didn't want to hear about her, see her in tagged photos, or get updates about her life. A few weeks later, I heard from a mutual friend that she was still talking about me, spinning stories to make herself look like the victim. She told people I'd overreacted and humiliated her, conveniently leaving out the part where she was already talking to another guy. I let it roll off my back. I wasn't interested in clearing my name or setting the record straight. The people who mattered already knew the truth, and anyone else? Well, they could believe whatever they wanted. Eventually, the noise died down. Her name stopped coming up in conversations, and the texts from people trying to mediate or explain stopped too. It was like she just faded into the background. And honestly, that's all I ever wanted. Story 2. Alright, so here's how it all started. I'm a single dad, 41 years old, just trying to get by and be a good dad for my daughter, who's 16 now. We've always been pretty close. At least, I thought so. I've been doing what I can to be there for her, setting up movie nights, helping her out with school stuff, just being someone she could rely on. Everything was pretty normal, or as normal as it can be, raising a teenager. So one night, my daughter asks if her friend, let's call her C, can stay over. I didn't think much of it. C had been around for about a year, and she and my daughter seemed inseparable. They do all the usual things teenage girls do, like watch movies, order way too much pizza, and talk way too loud into the early hours of the morning. I figured it was just another regular sleepover. They came over and everything seemed fine. We ordered pizza, they picked some movie I didn't know, and they settled in for the night. Around midnight, I went to bed, and I didn't expect to see them until the morning. But a few hours later, I got up to go to the bathroom. My house is small, so it's just a short walk down the hall from my room. I figured I'd go, get back to bed, and that'd be that. Except when I opened the bathroom door to head back to my room, there was C, standing right there in the hall, looking like she was waiting for me. She had this look in her eyes that didn't sit right with me. Too intense, you know? I figured she just needed the bathroom, so I said, "Hey, it's all yours," and tried to step past her. But then, she lunged. I don't know how else to describe it. She just leaned in, out of nowhere, like she was trying to kiss me. My brain kind of froze for a second, like I couldn't even process what was happening. Here's this kid, my daughter's friend, practically throwing herself at me in the middle of the night. I pulled back and laughed it off, trying to keep it light so it wouldn't get awkward. I said something like, "Whoa, hey, I think you've got the wrong guy." She looked a little embarrassed, kind of mumbled something I couldn't catch, and then turned around and went back to my daughter's room. I just stood there for a second, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. But in the end, I brushed it off. I figured she was just a kid doing something impulsive and awkward, and it didn't mean anything. I chalked it up to teenage weirdness and went back to bed, thinking that was the end of it. A few days went by, and I didn't think about it again. Then, out of nowhere, I get a call from the police. They told me they needed me to come in for questioning. Now, at first, I thought maybe there'd been some sort of mistake, like they'd gotten the wrong guy, or maybe it was about something else entirely. But as soon as I got down there, I knew it was bad. The look on the detective's face said it all. He starts telling me that C had accused me of, well, of violating her. I felt like my whole world was spinning. I remember just sitting there staring at him, not even understanding what I was hearing. I kept thinking, this has to be a joke or some misunderstanding. I tried explaining what actually happened, that there was nothing to it, that I'd turned her down. But they just kept looking at me with that same expression, like they were waiting for me to slip up, to admit to something I didn't do. I went over everything again and again. I told them about the hallway, how she'd tried to kiss me, how I'd laughed it off and gone to bed. But they kept pressing, asking for details, questioning every little thing I said like they were looking for holes. I knew I was innocent, but they were treating me like I'd already been convicted. Then they asked me why she'd make something like this up. I didn't have an answer. How was I supposed to know? I didn't know what was going through her head that night, and I couldn't explain why she'd twist something so innocent into something awful. I tried my best to keep calm, but the more they questioned me, the more I started to feel like I was being trapped, like they were building a case against me based on nothing but her word. When they finally let me go, I walked out of there in a complete daze. I felt sick, like my whole life was crumbling, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. The accusation hung over me, and I knew it was going to tear everything apart. When I got home, everything felt different. I was drained, my mind running a mile a minute, and I still couldn't believe this was actually happening. I thought maybe my daughter would see through it. No, it couldn't be true. She knew me, right? But when I tried to reach her, I got nothing, just radio silence. After a day or so, I finally hear from her, but not in the way I expected. She's cut me off, blocked me on social media, the whole 9 yards. And to make it worse, she made this post just this single line that said something like, "Believe women." That was it. Nothing more, just that one line. I can't even begin to tell you how much that hurt. Because here I am, fighting off these ridiculous accusations, and my own daughter has basically written me off to the world. I didn't give up, though. I texted her, tried calling, tried showing up at her mom's place to see her, but my ex wouldn't let me in. She's standing there, blocking the doorway like I'm some kind of criminal. And even though she wasn't saying much, I could see it in her eyes. She believed it too. It was like a punch to the gut. Here was this woman I used to share my life with, the mother of my child, looking at me like I was some kind of monster. Then my ex's brother, this guy who's always acted like he's got a grudge against me, decides to take matters into his own hands. He comes out of nowhere, shoves me back from the door, yelling at me to get lost, calling me names. And when I tried to hold my ground, tried to say I wasn't leaving until I saw my daughter, he clocked me right in the face. One good punch, and I was on the ground, and all I could hear was him shouting at me to stay away. So now I'm sitting there outside my ex's place, bleeding and humiliated. I'm thinking, how did things get this messed up? It's like the whole world flipped in an instant. Just days before, I was this regular dad who'd do anything for his kid. Now, I'm the guy nobody trusts, the one everyone thinks is a predator. At that point, I didn't know what to do. My daughter was gone, her mom wanted nothing to do with me, and even my own friends started acting weird around me. It's like this accusation just stuck to me, no matter how false it was. And the worst part was not having my daughter. That was what cut the deepest. She didn't want to see me, talk to me, hear me out. Nothing. And that's when it hit me. To her, I wasn't her dad anymore. I was just this person she wanted no part of. The days dragged on, and the police kept at it, calling me in again and again, asking the same questions like they were waiting for me to slip up. Every single time I told them the truth, but every single time I walked out of there feeling like I'd lost a piece of myself. And every time I came back to an empty house, knowing that my daughter thought of me as some kind of monster, it was killing me. I barely slept. When I did, I'd wake up in a cold sweat, thinking about all the things people might be saying behind my back, wondering if my daughter was going to spread this around, how I'd ever live this down. I'd never felt so alone in my life. Every part of me wanted to go to her, make her understand. I kept telling myself that if I could just talk to her, maybe I could get her to see reason. But every time I tried, I'd remember that look on her face when she blocked me. That look of total disgust, like I wasn't the man who raised her anymore. It was like I was invisible to her now, just erased from her life in a single move. All I could do was wait and hope that somehow, some way, the truth would come out. But sitting there alone, with everyone around me turned against me, it felt like that truth would never see the light of day. So getting called in for questioning once was rough enough, but it didn't stop there. It felt like every time I thought I'd explained myself clearly, they'd call me back in with more questions. I honestly started to feel like a criminal walking into that station every time. I'd sit down, trying to stay calm, but I could see the way the officers were looking at me, like they were just waiting for me to slip up. They'd ask things over and over, changing the wording, throwing in questions about things that had nothing to do with the actual accusation. It felt like they were just testing to see if I'd crack. The worst part was that they'd keep asking these ridiculous details, like, what were you doing on this night? Why did you let her stay over? Stuff that made me feel like they were more interested in finding something to use against me than actually listening to what I was saying. I kept thinking, how many ways can I tell you that nothing happened? I'll never forget the first time they made me sit there and give a statement. They handed me a piece of paper and told me to write down everything I could remember about that night. I'm sitting there in this tiny room, pen in hand, trying to figure out what exactly they want from me. And I mean, how do you remember every detail of a random night that seemed perfectly normal at the time? There was no reason for me to memorize every little thing because, to me, nothing even happened. I wrote what I could, told them exactly what I'd told them verbally 100 times, that I'd gotten up, gone to the bathroom, and then ran into C in the hallway. She tried to kiss me. I turned her down, and that was it. I thought it was no big deal, honestly. Just a weird moment I shrugged off, like, teenagers are awkward sometimes. But the cops? They didn't see it that way. I could see the way they exchanged looks, like they didn't believe me, and it got under my skin. Then came the harder questions. They started getting personal, asking me why I wasn't married anymore, why my daughter was even staying over at my place instead of her mom's. All these questions, like they were trying to dig up some hidden dirt on me. I couldn't help but feel like they had already made up their minds about me, that they'd decided I was guilty, and they were just waiting for me to mess up. At one point, they pulled out my daughter's statement. I didn't get to see it directly, but the way they talked about it, it broke me a little. They kept saying how she believed her friend, how she thought her friend would never make something like this up. And all I could think about was how quick she was to side against me, her own dad, without even talking to me first. It's like they were twisting the knife, reminding me that my own daughter saw me as the villain here. They even brought up my ex. They said, "Your ex-wife seemed pretty convinced about this too," like that somehow added more weight to the accusation. I get that divorces aren't always pretty, but we'd been decent co-parents. At least I thought so. But now it was like everyone around me was just ready to believe the worst. Each time I left that station, I was more drained than before. I'd walk out into the daylight feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My head was spinning with all these questions I couldn't answer, like how I'd even ended up here in the first place. And every time I got a call from them to come back, my stomach would drop. I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe they'd already decided to pin this on me, and nothing I said was going to change their minds. And while all this was happening, I didn't have my daughter. My own kid, the one person I thought would have my back, was completely gone from my life. I'd check my phone every day, hoping maybe she'd reached out, or even just sent a message saying she wasn't sure what to believe. But there was nothing. She was totally silent, and knowing that she'd rather believe her friend than her own father, that stung more than anything the cops could throw at me. One day they called me in and started showing me pictures. It was like they were trying to psych me out or something. They'd hold up photos, ask me to describe things that had no relevance, like the layout of my house, where people were sitting during dinner, what we talked about that night, stuff that felt completely random, but they'd watch me closely, like they were analyzing every word, waiting for me to stumble. It was a total mind game. I knew that nothing happened, that I'd done nothing wrong, but with the way they questioned me, I started second-guessing myself. I'd catch myself thinking, did I somehow mess up? Did I say something that sounded off? That's the thing about these situations. They mess with your head, make you doubt yourself, even when you know you're telling the truth. But I didn't back down. I gave them the same answers, over and over, even though I was exhausted. It felt like I was living in a nightmare where I couldn't wake up, couldn't shake this accusation that had come out of nowhere to rip my life apart. And I'd go home, alone, every night, replaying every word I'd said, every look the cops gave me, every sigh and side-eye that made me feel like I was guilty just for being there. And then there was the waiting. I'd leave the station and have days where I'd just be waiting, wondering if they'd call me back in, if they'd decided to arrest me, if they were talking to my daughter again, feeding her more reasons to stay away. It felt like I was on trial every single day, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. And all this time, there was this pit in my stomach, because I knew that if I couldn't convince them of my innocence, I'd lose everything. My daughter, my family, my whole life. Looking back, I still don't know how I got through it. I'd sit at home, staring at the wall, wondering how a single accusation could ruin everything. My world had flipped so fast, I barely had time to process it. And knowing that everyone around me was so quick to judge, so eager to believe the worst, it was a kind of pain I wouldn't wish on anyone. So yeah, that's where I was, constantly walking into that police station, facing people who didn't believe me, and then coming home to an empty house, wondering if this nightmare was ever going to end. So, after all those rounds with the police, feeling like I'm constantly trying to prove my innocence, the next blow didn't come from them. Nope, this one came straight from my own daughter, through her social media. I didn't see it right away, but I sure as hell heard about it. People started messaging me, friends calling me up, and I knew something was off before I even checked. When I finally saw it, my heart just sank. There it was, right at the top of her page. Believe women. Just those two words, posted like some sort of badge, a little nod to everyone following her that I was guilty without even saying my name. And for some people, that was all they needed to see. There's something about seeing your own kid say something like that for the world to see. Even if she didn't spell it out, everyone in our circle knew what she meant. Family, friends, acquaintances, they all knew I was the one being accused. And seeing my daughter put it out there felt like the final nail in the coffin. To her, I was guilty. End of story. I'll be honest, I stared at that post for way too long. Like maybe if I looked hard enough, it'd make sense or change somehow. It felt like betrayal in its purest form, but even more than that, it made me feel so small, so powerless. I couldn't reach her, couldn't get her to listen. And now she'd told everyone else what she thought too. There was no going back from that. Within hours, my phone started blowing up. Family members messaging me, asking what was going on, if it was true. People I hadn't talked to in years were suddenly interested in my life, like they were watching a train wreck. Some tried to keep it subtle, but it was clear. They all assumed I'd done it. Friends, neighbors, people from work. Everyone knew someone who'd seen it, and it was like I had this giant scarlet letter pinned to my name. And it's not like I could even defend myself. Anything I said would probably just look like a guilty person trying to cover their tracks. Plus, with everything still being investigated, the police told me I was better off staying quiet. So here I am, watching my life get ripped apart online, and I can't say a damn thing. Then came the messages, some from complete strangers. People accusing me, calling me all kinds of disgusting names, telling me what a monster I was. I got death threats, people saying I should rot in jail, that I was everything wrong with the world. They were sending me paragraphs of pure hate, and I had to sit there, powerless to defend myself. My daughter, meanwhile, was still silent. Nothing from her directly, no calls, no texts, just that post for everyone to see. And every time I checked her page, it was still there, with people flooding her comments with support. "You're so brave," they said. "You're doing the right thing." Nobody stopped to think for a second that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't guilty. That I might actually be the one telling the truth. The people I thought were friends disappeared. A few reached out, probably just to satisfy their curiosity, but it was clear they didn't believe me either. One of my closest friends, someone I'd known for years, didn't even bother to call. He just sent a single message that said, "Hope it's not true, man." Hope it's not true? That's all he had to say? It felt like everyone I'd ever trusted had vanished or turned against me in a matter of days. And my daughter's post stayed up. I kept hoping she'd take it down, that maybe she'd have second thoughts, that someone would talk sense into her. But it just stayed there, like a billboard reminding everyone who followed her that I was supposed to be a monster. One day, I actually considered posting something myself. I typed out this long, angry message defending myself, saying how much it hurt to be judged without any proof. But every time I looked at it, I thought about how it had looked to everyone else. They'd see it as damage control, or an angry man trying to intimidate his daughter. No one would listen to a word I said. They'd twist it, make it seem like I was trying to guilt trip her or pressure her into silence. So I deleted it, and I just sat there, feeling completely helpless. In the days that followed, I couldn't go anywhere without feeling the weight of that post. I'd run into people who knew about it, and they'd avoid eye contact or just stare, clearly wondering if they were looking at a criminal. People at work started acting weird around me, too, like they didn't know what to say. And to top it all off, a couple of my neighbors started avoiding me. I'd wave, and they'd pretend they didn't see me, just hurrying back into their homes like I had some kind of disease. I'd check her profile every day, hoping maybe she'd taken it down. But she didn't. And the longer it stayed, the more people joined in. It became this rallying point, people applauding her bravery for speaking up, or saying she was taking a stand. I wanted to scream, to tell them that she hadn't spoken to me, hadn't even tried to hear my side. But I knew that'd just make things worse. It's like the more I stayed silent, the guiltier I looked. But saying anything would make it worse. So I was just stuck, unable to do anything except watch my reputation go up in flames. My own daughter had painted me as a predator, and the rest of the world was eating it up like some kind of twisted drama. And what was I supposed to do? Some nights I'd lay awake, thinking about what I could say to her, how I could explain how much this was destroying me. But then I'd remember she wasn't answering, that even if I got a hold of her, she probably wouldn't listen. In her mind, she'd already decided who I was. And the worst part? Everyone else had too. I used to think social media was just a place to catch up with people, share photos, and maybe laugh at some stupid memes. I never thought it would be the thing that ripped my life apart. And now here I was, watching as my own daughter's post dragged my name through the mud, while people cheered her on, oblivious to what the truth actually was. I was officially alone, and no one cared. After weeks of living in a nightmare, answering the same questions over and over, the day finally came when I got another call from the detective. This time, though, he didn't sound like he was ready to go another round with me. There was something different in his voice, something almost, I don't know, cautious. He told me to come down to the station because they had an update on the case. At this point, I didn't know what to expect anymore. I figured it was just more of the same, More questions, more accusations, more waiting around while they picked apart my story like I'd done something wrong. But I went in, sat down, and waited. The detective looked at me for a moment, then leaned forward, almost like he was preparing me for what he was about to say. He cleared his throat and said, "We've been re-interviewing C. She's changed her story." Those words hit me like a brick. My first thought was that it was about to get worse, that somehow she'd found a way to dig the hole even deeper. But then he went on. He explained that they'd been pushing her for more details, something solid to back up her accusation, and apparently, things didn't add up. They'd started noticing inconsistencies, things that she'd left out before, details she couldn't keep straight. And when they pressed her on it, she began to stumble, backtracking on certain parts of her story. He said she'd gotten flustered, couldn't keep the timeline straight, couldn't remember what she'd already told them. At first, they thought it was just nerves, but the more they pushed, the shakier she got. Then he said they noticed something. Her entire story was starting to fall apart. They kept asking her to clarify, to give them one clear, consistent version of events. Every time she tried, she'd mess up, say something different than she had before. Eventually, she froze up, went silent, and that's when they really leaned into her. The detective said they pressured her, reminded her of the seriousness of what she was saying, how important it was to tell the truth. And that's when she cracked. According to the detective, C broke down in tears and admitted that none of it was true, that I hadn't done a thing to her. She confessed that the real reason she'd accused me was because of her mom's boyfriend. He was the one who'd hurt her, but she couldn't bring herself to accuse him directly. She was scared of him, felt trapped, and didn't know what else to do. She said that pointing the finger at me had seemed easier, safer somehow, since I wasn't really part of her life. When I heard those words, I didn't feel the relief I'd been waiting for. I felt a wave of anger, frustration, and hurt that I couldn't even describe. All this pain, all the sleepless nights, the way my own daughter had turned against me, it was all because I was the safe option to blame. C had completely turned my life upside down because she didn't want to face the real monster in her life. The detective went on, explaining that they were officially clearing my name and closing the case. Legally, I was off the hook. I wouldn't be arrested, wouldn't have to worry about charges hanging over my head. But as he spoke, it all felt so hollow. Sure, I was cleared in the eyes of the law, but what about everything else? My reputation, my relationships, the trust my own daughter had shattered, all of that was still in ruins. The detective could tell me I was free as much as he wanted, but it didn't change the fact that everything I cared about had already been ripped apart. I barely remember leaving the station. I must have driven home in a fog, replaying the detective's words in my mind, trying to make sense of it all. When I got home, I just sat on the couch, staring at the wall, feeling completely numb. The truth had finally come out, but it didn't fix a damn thing. I kept thinking about how easily C had turned me into her scapegoat, how quick she'd been to ruin my life because it was easier for her. And the worst part? She'd done it without a second thought, without any care for the destruction she was leaving behind. I thought about my daughter, how fast she'd believed the lie, how quickly she'd shut me out and posted about believing women, as if I was guilty without a doubt. For days after, I couldn't shake this feeling of emptiness. Sure, the accusation was gone, but the damage was done. Friends, family, everyone who'd once been in my corner had treated me like I was a monster. I'd been forced into this horrible isolation, and now they expected me to just pick up and carry on like none of it had happened. And then, of course, the calls started coming in. Mostly from family and people who suddenly wanted to talk after ignoring me for weeks. But I just wasn't in the mood. I couldn't shake the anger, the emptiness. The one message that really got to me was from my daughter, though. She left me a long voicemail. The second I saw it, I just stared at my phone, not sure if I wanted to listen to it. Part of me wanted to delete it right then. I mean, she'd already said everything she needed to say when she posted that believe women thing. I felt like, at that point, her loyalty was clear. But another part of me, the dad part, wanted to give her a chance. I guess there was still a part of me that hoped she had some explanation that would make this whole thing make sense. I hit play, and her voice came through, shaky and hesitant. She started off with, "Dad, I'm sorry." Right away, I felt that stab of hurt all over again. Sorry? She was sorry? That was supposed to cover the weeks of hell I went through? But I kept listening, even though every word felt like salt in a wound. She talked about how C was her best friend, how close they were, and how she felt like she had to believe her. She said something like, "I didn't think someone would lie about something like that, especially someone I trusted so much." Her voice was cracking, and I could hear that she was crying by the end of it. She was saying all these things about how she missed me, how she'd been scared and confused, and how now she felt guilty. I wish I could say it made me feel better. I wish I could say hearing her apologize took away all the pain and anger I'd been carrying around. But it didn't. All I could think about was how fast she'd been to throw me under the bus. There was no hesitation, no, "Dad, can we talk?" Nothing. She'd heard one accusation and went straight to condemning me, making me out to be the monster in the story. Her voicemail ended with her saying she wanted to come over and talk face to face. She said she needed to see me, to make things right. She kept saying how sorry she was, like repeating it would fix everything. But all it did was make me feel even emptier. Hearing her voice, knowing she was hurting now, didn't bring me any satisfaction. It didn't undo the fact that she'd already decided I was guilty before anyone even got a chance to investigate. That evening, I sat on the couch, phone in my hand, just staring at her name in my contacts. I kept asking myself if I should give her a chance, let her come over and try to explain herself in person. But every time I thought about it, I felt this wall go up. I couldn't shake the betrayal. My own kid had judged me without hesitation, and now, after it was all over, she wanted to talk? Around 8 o'clock, there was a knock on my door. I didn't even have to check. I knew it was her. She'd been texting all day, saying she was on her way and asking if I'd please let her in. But when I heard her voice pleading on the other side of the door, I couldn't bring myself to answer. I just sat there, feeling this mix of anger and sadness. She stayed outside for a while, knocking, calling my name. I could hear her through the door saying, "Dad, please, I need to talk to you." But I couldn't do it. Every part of me wanted to open the door, to just hug her, forgive her, tell her everything would be okay. But then I'd remember all those nights I spent alone, knowing she'd chosen to believe the worst of me. It was like I was stuck between being her dad and being a stranger she'd hurt, and I didn't know which one I was supposed to be. After a while, she left, and I thought maybe that would be the end of it. But the messages kept coming. She'd text me long apologies, saying she couldn't believe what she'd done, how sorry she was, how she needed to make things right. And I wanted to believe her, to believe that she was truly sorry. But how was I supposed to just erase everything? It wasn't just a mistake. It was a decision she'd made over and over again for weeks. She'd ignored me, blocked me, even posted publicly that she believed in her friend's accusation without a second thought. And now she wanted a clean slate? I couldn't wrap my head around how she could even ask for that, let alone expect it. At one point, she sent a message saying, "Dad, please don't hate me." And that hit me harder than I expected. Because the truth is, I don't hate her. I never could. She's my kid. And even though she ripped my heart out, I still love her. That's what made it hurt so much in the first place. If she were just some random person, it would have been easier to shake off. But she was my daughter. The one person in the world I thought would have my back no matter what. I spent a lot of nights thinking about whether I should forgive her, whether I could let her back into my life without feeling this constant sting of betrayal. But every time I thought about it, I'd remember the look in her eyes when she blocked me, the coldness in her voice when she said she didn't want to talk. Those memories were burned into my mind, and no amount of apologies seemed to make them go away. So I just stayed silent. I couldn't bring myself to answer her texts, to pick up the phone when she called. I didn't know if I'd ever be ready to have that conversation, to let her back in. I needed time, space to process everything, without feeling like I had to forgive her right away. And I know that might make me sound like the bad guy, like I'm being too harsh. But after everything I'd been through, I felt like I deserved a moment to breathe, to put myself back together without rushing into a forgiveness I wasn't ready for. She'd already moved on, already felt like she'd done her part by apologizing. But for me, the damage was still fresh. In the end, I sent her a short message. I told her I needed space, that I couldn't see her right now, and that I'd reach out when I was ready. It wasn't the answer she wanted, and I knew it probably hurt her, but it was the truth. I wasn't ready to open that door again, not yet. And maybe, just maybe, that was okay. So after I told my daughter I needed some space, I thought things would calm down, at least for a little while. I figured I'd get some time to process, get my head straight without constantly thinking about the betrayal. But that peace lasted all of about a day before the texts, calls, and messages started coming in again, this time from the family. It started with my mom. She's never been one to stay quiet, especially when it comes to family stuff. She called me, saying she'd heard about everything and was worried sick about me. I get it, I really do. But as soon as I picked up, it was clear she wasn't calling to check on me as much as she was calling to talk me into forgiving my daughter. She went on and on, saying things like, "You know how teenagers are? And she's young, she made a mistake." I tried to explain to her that this wasn't some small slip-up, that my daughter had destroyed my reputation, dragged me through the mud, and left me to pick up the pieces. But my mom wasn't having it. She kept pushing, saying, "But she's your daughter." Like that alone should be enough to erase everything. In her mind, family forgives family no matter what. Then my sister jumped in. She's a little younger than me, and we've always been close, but she took my daughter's side, too. I mean, she didn't say it directly, but her texts made it pretty obvious. She'd send me these long messages about how hard this must be for my daughter, how guilty she feels, how I need to be the bigger person. Bigger person? She was the one who threw me under the bus. But no matter how many times I tried to explain, my sister kept coming back with the same thing. She's young. She was scared. I wanted to scream. Everyone acted like I was the one overreacting, like I was supposed to just shove all my hurt and anger aside because she's my kid. My sister even had the nerve to say, "If you don't forgive her, you're going to lose her for good." Lose her? She was the one who left me, blocked me, publicly posted about me being guilty before I'd even had a chance to defend myself. But now that she's feeling guilty, I'm just supposed to let her back in without question? My mom called again the next day, and this time she tried another approach. She went on about how family's all we have, and how this is a teachable moment for my daughter. A teachable moment? I'm still trying to get back to feeling normal, still living with the emotional scars from all this, and she's acting like it's some kind of life lesson for my kid. It was like everyone saw this as a learning opportunity for her and a minor inconvenience for me. And then there was my ex-wife. I hadn't heard from her much directly since all this started, which was honestly fine with me, but suddenly she was blowing up my phone too. She left a voicemail saying we needed to sit down as a family and work this out. Yeah, like it's that easy. The whole reason I was in this mess was because she too chose to believe the accusations without question. She didn't let me in the house, didn't listen to a word I said, and now she thinks we can just have a family meeting to work things out. I'll admit, hearing everyone gang up on me like that made me feel like I was losing my mind. I was still carrying all this hurt, all this anger, and every single person around me was acting like I was the one dragging things out, like I was supposed to just move on. They kept telling me things like, "She's only a kid," and "She didn't know any better." But that wasn't an excuse to me. She knew well enough to go on social media and accuse me without a second thought. She knew well enough to cut me off, block me, shut me out. She knew what she was doing then, but now that it's over, everyone's pretending she's innocent. My aunt even got involved. I think she means well, but she's always been one of those peace at any cost types. She sent me this long email saying how important it is to heal as a family and how I should set an example of forgiveness. Honestly, reading that email made me feel sick. She went on about how forgiveness is strength and all this stuff that sounded more like a Hallmark card than actual advice. None of them wanted to understand what I'd gone through. They just wanted me to forgive and forget to make it easier for everyone else. After a week of this, I couldn't take it anymore. I messaged my mom and sister in our family group chat and told them I needed space. I said, "I understand you're worried about my daughter, but you need to understand that I'm hurt too. I can't just let this go overnight." I thought maybe they'd respect that. Maybe they'd back off and give me the time I needed to figure out my own feelings. But nope. My mom just doubled down saying how holding on to grudges was only going to hurt me in the long run. She kept going on about how I needed to be a good role model, and all that did was make me feel worse. I wasn't holding a grudge. I was just trying to heal, trying to deal with everything that had happened. But they made it sound like I was being stubborn or petty. Then my sister jumped in, saying I needed to think of the long term and how I might regret pushing my daughter away. It was like they'd all rehearsed the same script, telling me over and over how I'd lose her if I didn't forgive her now, immediately. No one stopped to think about what I'd already lost, what she'd put me through, what it felt like to be completely alone in this. I ended up muting the group chat for a few days, just to get some peace. But even then, they found ways to get through to me. My mom came by the house one evening, just showed up at my door like she was dropping by for a casual visit. She sat me down and gave me this whole speech about letting go of the anger. She even said, "You'll feel so much better when you forgive her." And maybe she's right. Maybe forgiveness would feel good someday, but not now. Not when everything still feels so raw. My aunt called that same night, saying how everyone was worried about me. I felt like a broken record, telling her over and over that I just needed space. But she kept pushing, saying, "Don't let this tear the family apart." Tear the family apart? The family had already fallen apart the second they all believed I was guilty. That damage was done, and it wasn't my responsibility to patch it up just because they were feeling guilty now. By the end of the week, I was just tired. Tired of explaining myself, tired of justifying my feelings, tired of everyone making it about how I needed to be the bigger person. I kept thinking about how none of them had even given me a chance when the accusations first came out. They'd all assumed the worst, just like my daughter did. But now, they wanted me to be the one to fix things, to make it easier for them. In the end, I decided to keep my boundaries. I told them I wasn't ready, that I didn't know when I would be, and that they needed to respect that. And honestly, it was hard. It was hard to push back against my own family, against people I'd always trusted. But I knew that if I caved now, if I forgave before I was ready, I'd just be carrying even more hurt. Maybe someday I'll feel differently. Maybe someday I'll be able to open that door again. But for now, I just need some time. And if they can't understand that, then maybe they never really understood me at all. Last update. After everything, I realized I couldn't stay here. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of what I'd been through. The judgment, the betrayal, the family and friends who'd turned on me without a second thought. I decided the only way to truly move forward was to leave it all behind. So I made the decision to sell my house, pack up, and move somewhere far away. I don't know where I'm going yet, but I know I need a fresh start. A clean slate where I can finally breathe again. As hard as it was, I cut off my daughter, my family, everyone who turned on me. This whole nightmare showed me just how little they thought of me, how easily they believed the worst with barely a question. For weeks I waited, hoping they'd reach out, that someone would stand by me, but they didn't. And now that the truth is out, they suddenly want to make amends, like a few apologies could erase the pain I went through. But I can't pretend this never happened. I can't just pick up the pieces like nothing's changed. Maybe in this new place I'll have a chance to build something better. Maybe I'll even find people who will actually stand by me. People I can trust to see me for who I am, not who they fear I might be. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I can't spend it surrounded by people who saw me as disposable. I'm done with people who abandoned me when I needed them most. So yeah, that's it. A new beginning, far from anyone who let me down. It's scary, but I'm ready to find a place where I can finally feel at peace again. Story 3. This story is titled, I was falsely accused of cheating by my wife, lost my kids, and spent years rebuilding my life. When she found out I became rich, she tried to sue me for alimony. I turned the tables in the most unexpected way. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Using throwaway for obvious reasons. This is going to be a long one, guys, but I promise it's worth the read. TLDR at bottom. So I, 34, male, need to get this crazy story off my chest because the last few years have been like something out of a bad Netflix drama, except it actually happened to me. It's taken me a while to be ready to write this all out, but here goes. I guess I should start with some background. I was your typical computer science nerd in college. You know, the kind who practically lived off energy drinks and could code for 12 hours straight. Got my degree from a decent state school. Not MIT or anything fancy. Just a regular college in the Northeast. Right after graduation, I landed a job at this small tech startup that was trying to build cloud security software. Not going to give too many details because I don't want to dox myself, but let's just say it was one of those typical 5 guys in a WeWork type startups. The pay wasn't great at first, like $65,000 a year in a pretty expensive city, but they offered stock options. More on that later. And I figured it was worth the gamble. Plus, the founders seemed like they actually knew what they were doing, unlike some of the other startups I interviewed with that were basically just burning through VC money. This is where I met Amy, not her real name, obviously. It was the most cliché meet cute ever. I was at this local coffee shop near our office, running on like 2 hours of sleep because we had a big deployment the night before. Totally knocked my coffee all over her MacBook. I felt like such an idiot, but she was surprisingly cool about it. Ended up buying her a new one. Maxed out my credit card, but worth it LOL. And somehow that turned into getting drinks, which turned into dating. Amy was working as a dental hygienist at the time. Super smart, funny, definitely out of my league looks-wise. We just clicked, you know? She actually seemed interested when I rambled about coding stuff, and I loved hearing her absolutely wild stories about nightmare patients at the dental office. We got married after 2 years of dating. Nothing fancy, just a small ceremony in her parents' backyard. Used most of our savings to put a down payment on a small starter home in the suburbs. The commute sucked, like 45 minutes each way, but the schools were good and we were thinking ahead. Kids came along pretty quick after that. Lily was born in 2016, and Max followed in 2019. Not gonna lie, those first few years were rough. Trying to balance a startup job with midnight feedings and diaper changes, there were days I literally forgot if I'd showered or not. But Amy was amazing with the kids. She cut back to part-time at the dental office so she could be home more, and we made it work. The startup was growing slowly but steady. We went from 5 guys in a WeWork to about 50 people in a real office. I got promoted to lead developer, then engineering manager. The stock options kept vesting. I had about 200,000 shares at 50 cents each. Honestly thought they'd probably end up worthless like most startup stock, but figured I'd hold on to them just in case. We had a pretty good life going. Nice neighborhood, decent schools, family vacations to Disney every other year. Nothing crazy expensive, but the kids loved it. Had cool neighbors too. Lots of young families, block parties in the summer, that whole suburban dream thing. Amy made friends with all the other moms. I'd grab beers with some of the dads while our kids had playdates. Normal, boring, happy life. Then Mike and Jessica moved in next door in 2021. Mike was this wannabe fitness influencer type. You know the kind, always posting workout videos on Instagram. Had his garage set up like a CrossFit gym. Super friendly at first, always offering to help with house projects and stuff. Jessica worked long hours at some law firm in the city, so Mike was home a lot during the day, working on his brand or whatever. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags. But when you're working 50 to 60-hour weeks trying to keep a startup alive through COVID, plus dealing with 2 young kids, you miss things. Or maybe you see them but don't want to believe it. Amy started working out at Mike's garage gym. Said she wanted to get in shape after having the kids. Started wearing makeup to go work out. Who does that? Would come back all giggly and energized? I actually thought it was good at first. She seemed happier, had more energy. God, I was fucking stupid. So Mike and his CrossFit obsession next door. At first it was just little things, you know? Like I'd come home from work and he'd be helping Amy move furniture or fixing something in our backyard. Always shirtless BTW because apparently shirts aren't a thing. When you have abs, I was working crazy hours at the startup because we were trying to close this huge deal with a major tech company. Can't name names but think FAANG level. Had a ton of security features to build, and deadlines were insane. Some weeks I was pulling 14-hour days. Basically only saw the kids on weekends. Amy seemed understanding at first, but then the comments started. Mike says you should make time for family. Mike thinks it's important to have work-life balance. Mike manages to run his business and stay in shape. Like, cool story, Amy. But Mike's business is posting gym selfies on Instagram while my job actually pays our mortgage. Then she started getting really into fitness. And when I say really into it, I mean obsessed. Suddenly our grocery bill doubled because everything had to be organic and grass-fed. Started buying all these fancy supplements that Mike recommended. Our kitchen looked like a GNC threw up in it. The workout schedule got weird too. Used to be like 3 times a week at normal times. Then it was every day. Always when I was at work or with the kids. She'd come back all flushed and happy, hair wet from showering at the gym. Started wearing makeup to work out. Who TF does that? Bought all this expensive Lululemon stuff because apparently her old Target leggings weren't good enough anymore. But the really weird stuff started with her phone. Amy was never really a tech person before. Like she'd leave her phone in random places and not care. Suddenly, she's glued to it 24/7. Always texting, always with the screen tilted away from me. Got a new password and wouldn't tell me what it was. We used to know each other's passwords, not because we snooped, but just in case of emergencies with the kids. The worst part? She started getting super aggressive about everything. Like I'd ask what she wanted for dinner and she'd snap at me saying I never help with meal planning. Or I'd try to talk about my day at work and she'd roll her eyes and say, "Not everything is about your precious startup." Real Jekyll and Hyde shit. One day I was playing with Max in the backyard and saw Mike spotting Amy during some kind of workout through their garage window. Dude was literally pressed up against her helping with her form or whatever. Max waves and goes, "Mommy and Mike are best friends." Yeah, buddy. I bet they are. I tried talking to her about it. Told her I was feeling weird about how much time she was spending over there. Big mistake. She absolutely flipped out. Started screaming about how I was controlling and jealous, how I was trying to stop her from having friends, how I was never home anyway, so why did I care? Then she started picking fights about money. The startup wasn't paying great. We were still in growth phase. But we were comfortable. Suddenly nothing was enough. She wanted to renovate the kitchen, needed a new car, wanted to send Lily to some fancy private school. When I explained about startup salary versus stock options, she'd get this look like I was speaking alien. Looking back, I should have seen what was coming. Started noticing weird charges on our credit card, fancy restaurants I never went to, hotel charges in our own city. Who needs a hotel 20 minutes from home? Some lingerie place I definitely never saw her wear anything from. The kids started acting different too. Lily, 8, went from being this happy, chatty kid to super quiet. Max, 5, got clingy, would cry whenever I left for work. Once caught him talking to his stuffed animals about how Mommy and Mike are having a sleepover while Daddy works. Yeah, that hit like a truck. One night I came home early because our deployment got delayed. House was dark, but Amy's car was in the driveway. Heard music coming from Mike's garage gym. Walked over thinking maybe I should try to clear the air, talk man to man. Yeah, that was not what I found. Won't go into details, but let's just say Amy's workout routine definitely wasn't focused on fitness. Jessica, Mike's wife, was working late at her law firm like usual. Didn't confront them then. Just took a video on my phone and went back home. Sat in my car for like an hour just processing. Called in sick the next day, talked to a lawyer. Guy told me to act normal, gather evidence, don't let them know I knew. Hardest fucking week of my life pretending everything was fine while they were literally doing their thing next door. So I had the video of Amy and Mike's workout session saved in about 6 different places. Was gonna confront Amy that weekend when my parents could take the kids. Had it all planned out. Divorce papers ready, evidence documented, everything. But Amy and Mike had their own plan, and they moved first. It was a regular Tuesday. I was at work, knee-deep in code reviews, when my team lead messages me to come to HR. Weird, but not totally unusual, given all the Amazon acquisition talks happening. Walk in, and there's 2 cops waiting. Fuck. Turns out Amy had gone to the police that morning with bruises, claiming I'd beaten her during an argument about money. According to her, I'd lost control when she confronted me about spending too much time at work. She even had pictures of bruises on her arms and face. Cops arrested me right there in the office. Most humiliating moment of my life, getting handcuffed in front of all my coworkers. Spent 48 hours in jail before my brother could post bail. Lost my phone, no access to my work laptop, company policy with arrests. Couldn't go home because of the emergency restraining order Amy filed. Had to sleep on my brother's couch while wearing an ankle monitor like some kind of criminal. The company put me on administrative leave. Their nice way of saying you're fired, but we'll wait for the PR nightmare to die down first. 15 years of clean record, never even had a parking ticket, and suddenly I'm a domestic abuser? My face was in the local news. Local tech executive arrested for domestic violence. Yeah, that went great with potential employers. Here's the really fucked up part. Amy and Mike had planned this for weeks. Found out later they'd been documenting every argument we had, aka normal conversations they twisted. Taking pictures of any time Amy bumped into something and got a bruise. She's clumsy AF, always has been. Building this whole fake history of abuse. They even got some of the other neighborhood moms involved. Suddenly, these women I'd had BBQs with, whose kids had birthday parties at our house, were writing statements about how they'd always suspected I was abusive. How they'd heard arguing from our house. Yeah, because Amy was screaming about CrossFit at 6 a.m. One even claimed she saw me grab Amy's arm aggressively while getting groceries from the car. I was helping her carry bags because she'd sprained her wrist doing whatever with Mike. The worst part? CPS got involved. Amy got emergency custody of the kids. I went from seeing my children every day to being allowed supervised visits for 2 hours every other weekend. Do you know how fucked up it is to have to see your own kids in some depressing government building while some social worker takes notes about every interaction? Had to cash out some of my stock options just to afford a lawyer. Company bylaws said I could keep the rest as long as I'd been there over 5 years. Thank God for small mercies, I guess. Moved into this depressing studio apartment near my brother's place because it was all I could afford with the legal bills and child support payments. Lily wouldn't even look at me during visits. Found out Amy had told her I was sick in the head and needed to get better before I could come home. Max would just cry and ask why I didn't love them anymore. Try explaining domestic violence allegations to a 5-year-old. Actually don't, because it's fucking impossible. Lost most of my friends too. Funny how people disappear when you're accused of something like this. The few who stuck around were mostly guys from work who'd seen how much I'd sacrificed for my family. They knew the real story, but their hands were tied with the legal stuff going on. Meanwhile, Mike and Amy weren't even trying to hide it anymore. He'd moved out of his house with Jessica, who apparently had her own shit to deal with once she found out about everything. They were posting gym selfies together, going to restaurants, acting like they were some perfect couple, using my child support money to fund their little love story. Had to start driving Uber on weekends, just to make ends meet. Went from leading engineering teams to picking up drunk college kids at 2 a.m. The irony? Some of my passengers were interns at my old company. Try keeping it together when some 22-year-old is talking about the amazing project you got fired from. Remember those stock options I mentioned? The ones I had to partially cash out to pay for lawyers? Yeah, this is where shit gets wild. But first, let me paint you a picture of rock bottom. I was living in this 400 square foot studio apartment that smelled like the previous tenant's 50 cats had a party, working 2 jobs, junior dev at some corporate hellhole during the day, only place that would hire me with the DV charges pending, an Uber driver at night, eating ramen and peanut butter sandwiches to afford child support. Still had about 200,000 shares of my old company's stock that I couldn't sell due to lockup periods. The startup was doing okay. Not great, but surviving. We had this security software that helped companies manage their cloud infrastructure. Boring tech stuff, I know. Amazon Web Services had been sniffing around for a while, but nothing serious. Then Log4j happened. For non-tech people, imagine someone found a way to break into basically every company's computer system through a tiny hole nobody noticed. That's Log4j. Our software happened to be really good at finding and fixing that hole. Right place, right time. One random Tuesday, I'm picking up my phone between Uber rides and see like 50 missed calls. The startup's getting acquired by AWS. Stocks going from $4 to $247 per share in the buyout. Did the math like 20 times cause I thought I was hallucinating? 200,000 shares times $247 equals $49.4 million before taxes. First thing I did? Threw up. Second thing? Called my lawyer. Third thing? Threw up again. Here's where it gets fun. The acquisition news made local headlines. Local tech startup acquired by Amazon for $2.1 billion. My name was buried in there somewhere as one of the early employees. Guess who reads local tech news? Amy's lawyer. Within 24 hours, I get this email from Amy. First one since the arrest. All sweet and concerned, like we're still best friends or something. Hey, hope you're doing well. Been thinking about our situation. Maybe we should talk about what's best for the kids. Translation. I heard you're rich now. Let me get my claws in. I didn't respond. Took a screenshot. Sent it to my lawyer. Then went back to my Uber shift. Needed to keep appearances normal while everything finalized. The acquisition would take 3 months to close, and I didn't want Amy causing problems before then. But Amy wasn't done. Next day, Mike's at my regular coffee shop. Totally coincidental, right? Tries to act all buddy-buddy. Hey man, water under the bridge. We all make mistakes. Amy's really sorry about everything. Yeah, sorry she accused me of beating her, got me arrested, took my kids, and ruined my reputation. But now that I'm worth millions, let's be friends. Such a convenient change of heart. Kept driving Uber right up until the acquisition closed. The looks on passengers' faces when they'd recognize me from the news articles. Priceless. Aren't you that guy who... Yep, that's me. Your millionaire Uber driver. The day the money hit my account was surreal. After taxes and fees, ended up with about $28 million. First thing I did? Bought a modest 3-bedroom house in a gated community. Nothing flashy, but it had good security and was in the kids' school district. Set up college funds for Lily and Max. $2 million each in trusts they can't touch till they're 25. Started a small software consulting business, mostly to keep busy and have a legit income source that wasn't surprise AWS acquisition. Hired a few of my old teammates who'd stuck by me through everything. Then Amy made her move. Got served with papers at my new house. She wanted half the acquisition money, claiming we were still technically married when the stock value increased, plus back child support calculated on my new net worth, and primary custody cause obviously a violent abuser. Shouldn't have millions to spend on kids. The irony? If she hadn't set me up, hadn't got me arrested and forced me to cash out some shares early, she might have had a case for half. But there's this funny thing about documented domestic violence accusations. She showed up at my new house on a Sunday morning. Hadn't seen her in person since the court dates. Looking all sad in this modest Target outfit. Quite a change from her usual Lululemon everything. Barely any makeup. Eyes all puffy like she'd been crying. Can we talk? She asks, like we're in some Lifetime movie. It's about the kids. It's always about the kids with her. Funny how they weren't her priority when she was busy destroying their dad's life. But I let her in. Had security cameras everywhere and my phone recording in my pocket. Trust issues? Nah, just experience. She sits there in my living room, crying about how Mike had manipulated her. Apparently he'd convinced her I was cheating. Projection much? Said I was gonna leave her broke and take the kids. Rich coming from the guy who literally helped frame me for abuse. He was so controlling, she sobbed. He made me file those charges. I was scared and confused. Sure, Amy. Those bruises just appeared magically, and those witness statements wrote themselves. Then comes the real kicker. I know I messed up, but I'm still legally your wife. The stock value increased while we were married. I deserve half for the kids. Fucking hell. This woman had me arrested, took my kids, nearly ruined my career, and now wants half my money? The audacity is actually impressive. The kids miss you, she continues, watching my reaction. We could be a family again. Start fresh. Yeah, 'cause nothing says fresh start like false domestic violence charges. She'd clearly practiced this speech, talked about how she'd gone to therapy, doubt, how she'd realized her mistakes, sure, how Mike had been the real abuser, ironic, even brought up our first date at that coffee shop, like memory lane was going to make me forget everything. The whole time she's talking, my phone's blowing up. Turns out she told her lawyer she was attempting reconciliation, trying to establish some bullshit narrative about us working things out when the money hit. Then she starts with the waterworks about how hard things have been. Living in a small apartment, karma's a bitch. Working extra shifts at the dental office, oh no, actual work, can barely afford the kids' activities. Maybe stop buying $200 leggings. I never wanted any of this, she says. Mike made me think you were this monster, but now I see he was the real monster. Right, because Mike forced her to 1. Cheat for months. 2. Plan elaborate abuse accusations. 3. Get me arrested at work. 4. Take my kids. 5. Spend my child support on gym gear. 6. Lie to everyone we knew. But here's the best part. She pulls out her phone, shows me pics of the kids. Recent ones I hadn't seen, 'cause, restricted access. Lily at her dance recital. Max playing soccer. All the moments I'd missed. They need their dad, she says. We can fix this. Translation: I'm broke. You're rich. Let's pretend I didn't completely fuck up your life. Then she drops the bomb. I've talked to my lawyer. If we can't work this out, well, I have rights. The stock value increased during our marriage. And with your history of domestic violence. Ah, there it is. The threat behind the tears. Classic Amy. I let her finish her performance. Even offered her some tissues. The cheap rough ones, not the fancy soft kind. Then I just said, I'll have my lawyer contact yours, and showed her out. The second she left, called my lawyer. Turns out Amy had been busy, filed for emergency spousal support based on the acquisition money, tried to modify the custody agreement, claiming my newfound wealth made me a flight risk, even reached out to some of my old coworkers looking for dirt. The real comedy? She's still posting inspirational quotes on Instagram about rising above negativity and finding your truth. Between those and gym selfies with her new trainer, guess Mike got replaced. You guys aren't going to believe what happened in court. Remember those security cameras I mentioned? Yeah, they're about to become important. Court date was set for last month. Amy shows up looking like she raided the Salvation Army. Plain dress, no makeup, hair and a messy bun. Real, struggling single mom vibes. Even had the kids with her, against court orders BTW, sitting in the front row like props in her little show. Her lawyer goes first. Dude's wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first car. Starts painting this picture of Amy as this devoted wife who supported her husband through his tech career and sacrificed her own ambitions to raise our kids. Claims she deserves half the acquisition money because her emotional support was crucial to the company's success. Yeah, such great emotional support. Nothing says I believe in you like false DV charges. Then, they bring up the domestic violence stuff again. Try spinning it like I'm this volatile tech bro who got lucky with stocks and might flee the country with my millions. Even had the balls to suggest I might be dangerous now that I have unlimited resources. My lawyer, Greg, absolute legend, just sits there taking notes, looking bored. Amy keeps shooting me these little worried looks, probably wondering why we're not freaking out about their bullshit story. Then it's our turn. Greg stands up, straightens his tie, and says, Your Honor, before we begin our defense, I'd like to present some new evidence that's recently come to light. Cue the security camera footage from my house. See, Amy didn't just visit once with her fake reconciliation act. She'd been coming by almost every day when I was at my office, trying to get in, and guess who was with her half the time? Mike. The cameras caught them planning the whole thing. Amy and Mike sitting in his car outside my house, literally rehearsing her emotional speech. Caught her planting some fake evidence in my mailbox, letters she'd written to herself about being afraid of me, dated before the DV charges. Even got them laughing about how easy it would be to take half my money. But wait, there's more. Remember those bruises she used to frame me? Turns out my Ring doorbell caught her and Mike staging those too, back when they were still neighbors. Video shows them using makeup to create fake bruises, taking photos, even practicing her scared wife face. The judge's face during all this? Priceless. Amy looked like she was going to throw up. Mike, who got subpoenaed to appear, kept trying to leave, but the bailiff made him stay. Then Greg drops the nuclear bomb. Turns out Amy and Mike had been trying to pull similar scams with other people. Found two other guys in different cities. Both successful tech workers, both falsely accused of abuse, both got taken to the cleaners and divorce settlements. Amy and Mike had it down to a science. The real MVP? Jessica, Mike's ex-wife. She's a lawyer herself and had been building a case against them for months. Came to court with a whole file of evidence, texts, emails, bank records showing how they'd split their previous scam money. By the time Greg was done, Amy's lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Started backpedaling so fast I thought he'd fall over. Your Honor, my client may have been confused about certain events. Judge wasn't having any of it. Called a recess, came back an hour later looking pissed as hell. Threw out Amy's claim for the stock money, ordered her to pay my legal fees, and referred the whole case to the DA for potential fraud charges. But the best part? The custody modification. Judge took one look at those videos of Amy and Mike plotting to scam me and ordered an emergency custody evaluation. Kids are with me now while Amy gets investigated for perjury and fraud. Oh, and Mike? Dude tried to run as soon as court ended. Literally sprinted for the parking lot. Got caught by Jessica's new boyfriend, who happens to be a cop. Talk about karma. I will update you guys soon. Final update time. A lot's happened since the court showdown 3 months ago. First off, Amy and Mike got arrested. Turns out running multiple fraud schemes across state lines is federal territory. FBI's been building a case against them for weeks. They found 3 other victims besides me. All tech guys, all got hit with false DV charges, all lost everything in rigged divorces. Amy and Mike had their scam down to a science. The kids are with me full time now. Not gonna lie, it's been rough. 2 traumatized kids plus 1 dad learning how to be a full-time parent equals some serious chaos. First week, I burned dinner 3 times, sent Lily to school with mismatched shoes, and completely forgot about Max's show and tell day. But we're figuring it out. Hired a child psychologist who specializes in parental alienation cases. Dr. Sarah, not sharing her full name, is amazing with the kids. Lily finally opened up about how Amy and Mike coached her to say she was scared of me. Max had been told I didn't want to see them anymore because I loved money more than them. Who does that to their own kids? The house thing worked out better than expected. Moved us to a nice neighborhood with good schools, but nothing flashy. Got a gaming room for Max, kids obsessed with Minecraft, and let Lily design her own bedroom, currently very pink. Security system that'd make Fort Knox jealous, but it helps them feel safe. Started working from home full-time. My consulting company's doing well, but the kids come first now. Got a solid team handling most projects while I focus on being dad. Funny how life works. Spent years chasing success in tech, and now my biggest achievement is making Max laugh at my terrible dad jokes. Amy's facing 15 to 20 years for fraud, perjury, and some other charges I don't fully understand. Her lawyer tried to cut a deal, but the feds aren't playing. Turns out they really don't like organized fraud schemes targeting tech workers. Who knew? Mike rolled on Amy the second things got serious. Dude literally cried in FBI custody. Claimed she was the mastermind, probably true, and he was just a victim of her manipulation. Definitely BS. He's still looking at 10 years minimum. Jessica, Mike's ex, has been surprisingly awesome through all this. She's helping the feds build their case and has been great with the kids. They remember her from when we were neighbors, and she comes over sometimes to bake cookies with them. No drama, just genuine care for 2 kids who've been through hell. The money stuff sorted itself out. Set up proper trusts for the kids, invested in some boring but stable stuff my financial advisor recommended, and started a foundation helping fathers fighting false DV charges. The foundation's already helped 3 dads get their kids back. Dating? Yeah, that's a hard no right now. Trust issues aside, I'm not bringing anyone new into my kids' lives until they're ready. They've dealt with enough adult drama for a lifetime. Some unexpected good came from all this, though. Remember my old company? The one that fired me after the DV charges? Their CEO called personally to apologize. Offered me a consulting gig, declined, and wrote a public letter clearing my name. Didn't need it anymore, but it meant something. Lily's doing better in school now. Her teachers say she's smiling again, participating in class. She's joining the science club next semester. Turns out she's got her dad's nerd genes after all. Max is still Max. Endless energy, and a heart too big for his body. He's decided he wants to be a computer game maker who helps people when he grows up. The neighbor who wrote that false statement against me? Came by last week to apologize. Said Amy had convinced her I was dangerous. Showed her fake evidence. We're not going to be friends, but it's one less person looking at me like I'm a monster. Some days are still hard. The kids have nightmares sometimes. Lily gets anxious when I'm out of sight too long. Max asks at least once a week if I'm sure I want them living with me. But we're healing. Taking it one day at a time. TLDR. Ex-wife and CrossFit bro. Facing federal charges. Got my kids back. Focusing on being a dad and helping other fathers in similar situations. Edit. Holy shit, this blew up. Thanks for all the support through this whole saga. Edit 2. To everyone asking about the foundation. Yes, we're legit. But no, I'm not sharing links. Don't want to dox myself. Edit 3. For everyone asking about updates, if anything major happens with Amy's case, I'll post again. But for now, focusing on my kids and our fresh start. Final note. Changed some small details throughout these posts for privacy, but the core story is 100% true. If you're a father going through something similar, document everything, get a good lawyer, and don't give up. Your kids need you. Story 4. Mom kicked me out because stepdad and his kids hate me, but I own the house. So, when I was 15, my dad passed away. It was a tough time. Like, losing him felt like my whole world got flipped upside down. My dad, though, was always that guy who had everything planned out, super organized. The kind of guy who'd keep receipts for stuff from 10 years ago just in case. Anyway, turns out he had his will all set up way in advance, and let me tell you, it was specific as hell. After he passed, my mom didn't waste any time moving on. I get it. Maybe she was lonely, but it felt way too quick, One moment we're at his funeral, and before I even had a chance to process everything, she's already talking about some new guy she met. And I'm like, wait, what? It felt like 1 minute I was dealing with losing my dad, and the next, there was this stranger, Rob, moving into our house. It all happened so fast, I barely had time to blink. One day it was just me and my mom trying to get by, and the next, there's this dude in our living room acting like he's been there all along. Rob was, well, I guess he was all right at first. But man, it just didn't sit right with me. I mean, my dad's stuff was still all over the place. His chair, his tools, even his favorite mug that he'd always use every morning. It was like he was still there. And then Rob comes in and suddenly all that stuff starts disappearing. My mom would be like, oh, we need to make room for Rob's things. And I'd think, what's the rush? It's not like Rob was paying rent or anything. It felt like she was erasing my dad bit by bit. And that stung. Anyway, a couple of months after my dad passed, I got the news about the inheritance. I remember the day so clearly because it was probably the one time I actually felt like something was going right. My dad's lawyer sat me down and explained everything. My dad left everything to me, not a penny to my mom. I guess it makes sense since they weren't married, and legally she didn't have a claim. But still, it caught me off guard. At first I was like, wait, are you serious? I didn't really know how to react. I mean, I was just a kid, and suddenly I was told I owned properties and money. It was kind of overwhelming. My mom, though? Oh, she was pissed. She tried to act all supportive, but I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't expecting that. She probably assumed she'd get at least something, but nope, it was all mine. And because of the way my dad set up the will, there was no way she could challenge it. The guy was thorough. He made sure everything was locked down so tight that even if she tried, she'd lose. At first, she tried to play nice, like, hey, I'm so happy for you, sweetheart. Your dad really loved you. But it wasn't long before she started pushing. She kept bringing up how it would be nice if I shared some of it with her. As a gesture of goodwill or whatever. It was always framed like it was my choice, but the way she said it, it felt more like pressure. And then, one day, she comes up with this plan. She asked me if I'd consider transferring one of the properties to her. I remember standing there, just kind of staring at her like, is she for real? She went on, saying how it would make things easier with Rob if he felt more secure, like he was really part of the family. She wanted to show him that he was welcome by putting the property in her name. In her head, this was all about making him feel comfortable, so they could have a future together. But to me, it felt like she was choosing him over me. I mean, I was 15. I just lost my dad. I was still trying to figure out how to get through each day, and here she was, basically asking me to give up a piece of my dad's legacy to make her new boyfriend happy. It was like she didn't even think about how it might feel for me, her own kid. I told her I couldn't, even if I wanted to. My dad's will was set up so that I couldn't touch any of it until I was 21. The look on her face when I said that, man, I don't think I'll ever forget it. She tried to hide it, but she was mad. I think she knew deep down that she couldn't change anything, but it didn't stop her from trying. She'd bring it up every once in a while, just testing the waters, like, are you sure you can't transfer it? Not even one property? And every time, I had to remind her that there was literally nothing I could do. It wasn't my choice. It was how my dad set things up. To be honest, even if I could have given her the property, I don't think I would have. It felt like a betrayal to my dad's memory. This was his way of taking care of me, making sure I had a future, and I wasn't going to mess that up just to make my mom's new boyfriend feel cozy. And of course, there was Rob's kids. My mom was bending over backwards to make sure they felt welcome. They were cool, I guess. A son who's now 18 and a daughter who's 19. But my mom was all about making them comfortable, making sure they had everything they needed. It wasn't like she was a total monster to me or anything. She still acted like a mom, but there was this clear difference in how she treated them compared to me. I'd see them all go on trips together. She'd always frame it like it was this great idea, saying, wouldn't you rather visit your grandparents on your dad's side? Like, every single time they planned something, she'd suggest I spend time elsewhere. I could see right through it. She didn't outright say, you can't come, but it was obvious she didn't want me around. And when you're a kid, you don't really know how to react to that. You just kind of go along with it, hoping that maybe she'd change her mind, but she never did. I spent a lot of weekends at my grandparents' place, and don't get me wrong, they were great. But every time I heard about one of those trips, it was like a little reminder that my mom was choosing her new life over me. Looking back, I think my dad must have known something like this could happen. Why else would he leave everything to me and nothing to her? Maybe he saw how things were going between them. Or maybe he just wanted to make sure I'd be okay if anything ever happened to him. Either way, I'm grateful he did. But at the same time, it made things with my mom really complicated. I felt like I was stuck in the middle, having to protect what my dad left me while also dealing with my mom and her new family. That's pretty much how things went for a while. Rob settled in more and more, and my mom made sure his kids felt like they were at home. And me? Well, I kept my distance and just tried to keep the peace, but it wasn't easy. I was only 15, trying to make sense of everything, and all I knew was that things were never going back to how they used to be. So by the time I turned 17, things had gone from awkward to full-blown tense between me and Rob. I mean, I tried to stay out of his way at first. Like, he was my mom's boyfriend, whatever, I didn't really care about him. But he started acting like he was the man of the house, and that's when things went south. It was my dad's house, right? And here he was, moving his stuff in, giving me attitude, and trying to tell me what I could or couldn't do. It wasn't even subtle. He'd say stuff like, you need to show more respect around here, or it's time you learn some discipline. I just sat there thinking, who does this guy think he is? Like, he's not my dad, and he sure as hell doesn't get to act like he owns the place. So I pushed back. Every time he tried to lay down some rule or act like he had a say, I'd remind him that the house wasn't his. I even came up with this nickname, John Conroy, which honestly made no sense, but it bugged him, and that was enough for me. Every time he tried to tell me what to do, I'd be like, all right, John Conroy, whatever you say. And man, did that get under his skin. Things started getting pretty heated between us. It was like this silent war. He'd make these comments, and I'd snap back. My mom, of course, was always trying to play peacemaker. She'd say, oh, you two just need time to get used to each other, or Rob's only trying to help you grow up. But I knew it wasn't about that. It was about control. Rob wanted to be the boss, and I wasn't about to let that happen. And the thing is, my mom started taking his side more and more. She'd get upset with me for disrespecting him. She even started saying stuff like, you need to understand that Rob's a part of our family now. Our family. As if we'd all agreed on that or something. I'd tell her, this isn't his house, it's Dad's, and he's not going to just waltz in and act like it's his. But she never listened. She just kept telling me to get along and try harder. One day, things really blew up. Rob had been acting all tough, talking about how I needed to pull my weight around the house. And yeah, that pissed me off. I told him straight up, you're not my dad, and this isn't your house. He started getting all red-faced, and my mom came rushing in, trying to calm things down. She was like, why do you always have to fight with him? Why can't you just respect him? And I was like, why should I? He doesn't respect me, and he doesn't respect that this was Dad's house. That argument was kind of the last straw. Rob stormed off, and my mom just stood there, looking tired and frustrated. She said something like, this isn't working. We can't keep fighting like this. And that's when she dropped the bomb on me. She told me I needed to leave. I couldn't believe it. I stood there waiting for her to take it back or say she was just upset and didn't mean it. But she didn't. She looked me in the eye and said, I think it's best if you find somewhere else to stay for a while. I was like, wait, my house? You're kicking me out of my house? She just sighed and said, it's not just your house, it's our home. And Rob and his kids deserve to feel comfortable here too. I felt this wave of anger and hurt hit me all at once. She was choosing them over me. It wasn't even a question anymore. She kept going, saying, I'm doing this for your own good so you can have some space and cool down. But I knew it wasn't about me cooling down. It was about making things easier for her and Rob. She thought if I wasn't around, they'd have their perfect little family and everything would be fine. I left the room, slamming the door behind me. I was so mad, I could barely think straight. I didn't even know what to do next. I mean, I was 17. I didn't have a job that paid enough to get my own place, and all my stuff was in my house. I went up to my room and started packing up my things, just throwing stuff into bags. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there anymore. Thankfully, my grandparents stepped in. They'd always been there for me, even when my mom wasn't. They offered me a place to stay, and I grabbed onto that offer like a lifeline. My grandpa picked me up that evening, and I remember just sitting in the car, staring out the window, feeling numb. It was like everything had crumbled in one day. My own mom was kicking me out of the house my dad had left me. When I moved into my grandparents' place, it felt safe. They were amazing, and they never made me feel like I was a burden. My grandpa especially tried to make me feel better. He said, you're always welcome here, kiddo. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise. And honestly, I needed to hear that. After everything with my mom, it felt good to know someone had my back. But my mom? She'd still come over to visit sometimes, acting like everything was fine. She'd say things like, I love you, you know that, right? And I'm just trying to make sure everything stays peaceful. It was like she was trying to make herself feel better about what she'd done. I remember one time she brought over a bunch of my old things, saying she thought I'd want them at my grandparents' place. And I just stared at her, thinking, you want to act like this is normal? But it's not. She'd talk about how she was just doing what was best for everyone, how Rob needed space to feel at home, and how I'd understand one day. I just nodded along, but inside, I felt like she was justifying her own choices. She'd say stuff like, you'll always have a home with us when you're ready. And it took everything in me not to tell her that it wasn't my home anymore. It was Rob's. It was hard to see her and not feel angry. She was the one person who was supposed to be on my side, and she wasn't. She was choosing some guy she'd known for barely a couple of years over me, her own son. And she acted like it was all for my benefit, like kicking me out was somehow her way of helping me grow up. After a while, I just stopped engaging with her visits. I'd be polite, but I wouldn't let her excuses get to me anymore. I focused on my school, my friends, and my grandparents. They became my real family during that time. My grandma would always tell me, you've got us, and you're going to be okay. And even though I still felt angry and hurt, having them around made things a little easier. I guess, deep down, I started to understand that my mom was never going to be the parent I needed her to be. She was too focused on building this new life with Rob and his kids. And me? I was just a reminder of the old life she was trying to move past. So I started moving past it too. I figured if she could pick Rob over me, then I could choose to focus on myself instead. At the end of the day, I knew I had my grandparents' support, and that was enough. I learned to stand on my own 2 feet, even if it meant not having my mom there. And honestly, that was probably the best lesson I could have learned back then, relying on myself and knowing when to walk away, even from people who are supposed to care. When I finally finished college, I knew it was time to take a closer look at the properties my dad left me. The whole time I was with my grandparents, I kept reminding myself that these properties were my shot at building something for myself. My dad, he'd planned everything so that I'd have a future, even without him around. And I wasn't going to let that go to waste. One of the places my dad left me was the house my mom and Rob were living in. Yeah, the same one where I used to live before everything went down. It was a good house, solid structure, nice neighborhood, perfect for renting out if I ever got the chance. So, with my degree in hand and the idea of maybe going for a master's on the horizon, I thought, why not renovate it and rent it out? I mean, extra income wouldn't hurt, especially if I was planning on going back to school. I knew I had to break the news to my mom at some point, and I didn't expect it to go well, but it had to be done. I showed up at the house one day, ready to have the conversation. The plan was simple. I'd tell her about my intention to renovate and give them a reasonable time frame to figure out their next steps. It was going to be tough, no doubt, but I figured if I was respectful about it, she might understand. Well, that plan didn't even get a chance. When I knocked on the door, no one answered. The house was dead quiet, and their car wasn't in the driveway. I thought maybe they were just out running errands, so I waited for a bit. But after a while, it was clear they weren't coming back anytime soon. I tried calling my mom's cell, left a voicemail, and even sent her a text saying I'd stop by and wanted to talk. No response. So I headed back to my grandparents' place. Later that night, I found out they were on vacation. My grandma mentioned it casually, like, "Oh, your mom and Rob went down to Florida for a few days." I was like, "Seriously? Here I am trying to have a mature conversation about my property, and they're off on some beach getaway?" I mean, I get that people need a break, but a heads up would have been nice. I gave it a couple more days, hoping she'd get back to me. But still nothing. No call, no text. Just radio silence. It was frustrating. I felt like she was avoiding me, and that made things harder. I needed to move forward, but I couldn't do that if she kept dodging me. So, after waiting around for a bit, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I knew legally the house was mine. My name was on the deed, and I was the one paying the property taxes every year, so I had the right to take control of the situation. I decided to change the locks. Yeah, I know it sounds drastic, but it felt like the only way to make it clear that I was serious. I needed to start the renovation process, and I couldn't have them treating it like a vacation home while I was trying to move forward with my plans. So, I went ahead and did it. I called a locksmith, got the locks changed, and made sure I had all the keys. While I was there, I took a look around the place. It was weird being back in the house where I grew up, but it felt different. It didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like a stranger's place, with bits and pieces of my mom and Rob's life scattered around. Seeing it like that only made me more determined to follow through with my plan. The next day, my phone started blowing up. My mom had finally gotten back, and she was furious. I had a bunch of missed calls and angry voicemails from her, basically demanding to know why they couldn't get in. She said stuff like, "How could you do this to us?" And, "This is so disrespectful." I could feel the anger just pouring through the phone. I knew she'd be upset, but hearing her like that, I guess it hit harder than I thought. I finally picked up when she called again, and she was shouting before I could even say hello. She was like, "Why did you lock us out of the house?" I tried to stay calm and told her that I'd been trying to reach her for days to talk about my plans. She didn't want to hear it. She kept saying things like, "You can't just kick us out like this," and "We have nowhere else to go right now." I explained that I'd given them plenty of time, and I had every right to reclaim the house. I told her I planned to renovate and that I'd given her a heads up, but she wasn't having any of it. She said, "This is still my home. You can't just take it away from me." And that's when I knew there was no reasoning with her. In her head, it wasn't about what was legal or fair. It was about what she thought she deserved. At that point, I had to put my foot down. I told her they had 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live. I wasn't going to be a jerk about it. I wanted to give them a chance to move their stuff and figure things out. But 2 weeks was all I could offer. I told her that after that, the renovation work would begin, and they couldn't stay. The silence on the other end of the line was almost worse than the shouting. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and cold. She said, "I never thought you'd do this to your own mother." And I felt that, like a punch to the gut. But I knew if I backed down now, I'd never be able to move forward. This was about me taking control of my own life, and sometimes that means making tough calls. After that, I didn't hear from her for the rest of the day. But the next morning, I showed up at the house to start preparing for the renovations, and guess who was waiting for me in the driveway? My mom and Rob, both of them looking furious. Rob tried to step up to me like he was going to intimidate me into letting them stay. He was all, "You think you can just kick us out like this? You've got no right." I didn't back down. I told him flat out, "This isn't your house, and it never was. I'm the one paying for it, and I'm the one calling the shots." He was fuming, but he couldn't argue with that. My mom, though, she started crying, saying I was being unfair, that I was putting them on the street. She said I was acting just like my father, and not in a nice way. It stung, but I kept my cool. I tried to be reasonable and said, "Look, you have 2 weeks to figure things out. I'm giving you that time, but I need to start the renovations soon. This is my property, and I'm doing what's best for me." She just shook her head, tears streaming down her face, saying she couldn't believe how cold I was being. Rob was standing there, trying to look tough, but I could tell he knew he had no power in this. It wasn't easy. Seeing my mom cry, seeing how angry she was, it sucked. I felt guilty, even though I knew I was doing what I had to do. But I also knew that if I let them stay, I'd never get them out. This was my chance to take back what was mine, and I wasn't going to let it slip through my fingers. By the time they left, it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but at the same time, there was this knot in my chest. I knew I'd made the right call, but that didn't make it any less painful. I drove back to my grandparents' place, knowing I'd have to see this through, no matter how hard it got. Alright, so after I told my mom and Rob they had 2 weeks to move out, I thought maybe things would calm down a bit. I figured they'd be mad at first, but then they'd start packing and just accept it. I mean, it wasn't like they had any other option. But of course, nothing is ever that simple. Instead of dealing with it quietly, my mom decided to make things as dramatic as possible. The next day, I went over to the house to start preparing for the renovations. I wanted to check out the backyard and take some measurements for the work I had planned. I had a contractor scheduled to come by in a few weeks, and I wanted to make sure everything was good to go. I was out there with a notepad, making notes, when I heard the back gate swing open. I turned around, and there was my mom, storming in like she was on a mission. She was furious. Like, I'm talking full-on yelling before I even had a chance to say anything. "How could you do this to us?" she shouted, her face all red and puffy. She kept going, throwing her hands in the air and demanding to know how I could betray my own family. She was like, "We have nowhere else to go. What do you expect us to do?" I tried to stay calm, even though my heart was pounding. I told her, "Mom, I gave you 2 weeks. You have time to find a place. I'm not just kicking you out with no warning." But she wasn't hearing it. She went on and on about how I was being selfish and how she had sacrificed so much for me. And honestly, that got to me. It was like she was trying to make me feel guilty for wanting my own space back. And then, of course, Rob showed up. He came in with that same tough guy attitude, like he was going to somehow change my mind by glaring at me. He was all, "You think you can just boss us around because you own this place? We've built a life here." And I was like, "No, Rob, I built a life here. This was my dad's house, and I'm taking back what's mine." I could tell that wasn't what he wanted to hear. He got all worked up, and for a second I thought he was going to try something. But my mom stepped in, putting her hand on his chest, telling him to calm down. She turned back to me with tears in her eyes and said, "Please, we need more time. We've got nowhere else to go." And then Rob's stepdaughter, the one who's 19, came out of the house crying. I hadn't even noticed her until she stepped onto the porch, clutching her stomach. That's when my mom blurted out, "She's pregnant! You can't do this to her! You can't kick us out when she's about to have a grandchild!" That hit me like a punch. I wasn't expecting that. For a moment, I just stood there, not really knowing what to say. It felt like they were pulling out every card they could to get me to change my mind. And I mean, yeah, I felt bad for her. She was young, and being pregnant is a lot to handle. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't let that change things. I took a deep breath and told them, "Look, I'm sorry she's going through that, but this is still my house. You have 2 weeks. I'm not asking you to leave today." My mom started sobbing, and Rob just stood there, looking like he was ready to explode. It got to a point where I just couldn't stand being there anymore. I told them, "I've made my decision. I need this place back. I'll come by in 2 weeks to check in." And then I walked out. It wasn't easy. I could hear my mom still yelling as I left, calling me heartless and selfish, and saying she couldn't believe her own son would do this to her. But I had to keep walking. If I stayed there any longer, I knew I'd start second-guessing myself, and I couldn't afford to do that. When I got back to my grandparents' place, I tried to focus on my plans for the renovations. I pulled up all the paperwork, went over my notes, and tried to keep my head clear. But it was hard. I kept thinking about my mom and what she'd said. The guilt started creeping in. I mean, no one wants to be the bad guy, especially not when it comes to family. And then my phone started buzzing. It was one of my mom's relatives, an aunt I barely ever talked to. She was all like, "I heard what happened. And I just have to say, I'm disappointed in you. Your mom's in a tough spot, and you're making it worse." She kept going on about how I was being cruel and how I needed to help my mom out because that's what family does. It wasn't just her either. Over the next few days, I started getting calls and texts from other relatives, all saying the same thing. They were calling me selfish and saying I should give my mom more time, or even just let her stay. They acted like I was some villain in all this, like I was kicking her out for fun or something. No one seemed to get that this was about my future, too. At one point, my grandma noticed how stressed I was getting. She sat me down and said, "Listen, you did what you had to do. Don't let them guilt trip you into thinking you're wrong. Your dad left you this house for a reason." And that helped a little. It was good to have her on my side, but it didn't make the phone calls and messages any less annoying. The worst part was when one of my mom's relatives sent me this long message about how my mom was caught in the middle and that I needed to show compassion because she was trying to keep the peace. That one got under my skin. I wanted to reply and say, how is she caught in the middle when she's the one who chose them over me? But I didn't. I knew getting into it with them wouldn't help. It would just add fuel to the fire. So I started ignoring the calls and messages. I figured if they were so worried about my mom, they could help her out. They could offer her a place to stay or pitch in to find her a new spot, but none of them were doing that. It was easier for them to just blame me. Typical. As the days went by, I focused on my renovation plans. I met with the contractor, went over the details, and set up a timeline. I knew once I got things going, I'd have to face my mom and Rob again, and I wasn't looking forward to it. But I kept reminding myself that this was for me, for my future. I'd spent too long letting other people dictate what I could and couldn't do. It was time I took control. And honestly, despite all the drama, I started feeling a bit better about my decision. I knew deep down that I was doing what my dad would have wanted. He left me these properties so I could have a future, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me, not even my own mom. By the end of that first week, I'd stopped feeling as guilty. I knew I wasn't the one in the wrong here. I'd given them time, and I was being fair. If my mom and Rob wanted to make it harder than it needed to be, that was on them. I just had to stay strong and stick to my plan. By the time the 2 weeks were up, I knew I had to face them again. I spent those days preparing myself, mentally going over what I was going to say when the time came. I mean, part of me hoped they'd have found somewhere else by then and would just quietly move out, but I knew that was probably too much to ask for. The way things had been going, I had a feeling they were going to push back, try to make it as difficult as possible. The day I went back to the house, I pulled up to the driveway, and sure enough, there was my mom, Rob, and even a few of their friends and relatives standing around. It was like they were putting on a show or something. My stomach dropped, but I knew I had to stay calm. If I let them see me stressed, they'd just use that to push me more. As I walked up, my mom came rushing over, tears streaming down her face. She went straight into this whole emotional speech, saying, "I can't believe you'd really do this to us. You're my son. How could you turn your back on me when I need you the most?" It was the kind of thing that, if I hadn't been so prepared for it, would have really gotten to me. But I'd spent days thinking about it, replaying her words in my head, so I just stayed calm. I told her, "Mom, I gave you 2 weeks. That's fair and you know it. This is my house and I have every right to take it back." She kept shaking her head, saying I was being unreasonable and that 2 weeks wasn't enough time. But I knew that wasn't true. If they'd really tried, they could have found something, or at least made some progress. It felt like they were just stalling, hoping that if they pushed hard enough, I'd back down. Then Rob jumped in, all fired up like he was ready for a fight. He was like, "This is our home. You can't just show up and take it from us like this." I could feel the tension rising, but I kept my voice steady and said, "Actually, I can. Legally, it's my property. I've been more than patient, and now it's time for you to move out." I could see the anger in his eyes, but he didn't have a response to that. He knew I was right. That's when the relatives got involved. One of my mom's cousins stepped forward and started going off about how family is supposed to stick together and how I was acting like a landlord instead of a son. She said stuff like, "Your mom has done so much for you and now you're just abandoning her?" It felt like everyone was ganging up on me, trying to make me feel like the worst person in the world. I took a deep breath and told her, "I understand you're trying to help, but this isn't your business. My dad left me this house for a reason, and I'm doing what I have to do." I could tell that didn't go over well because she just scoffed and turned away, muttering something about how I was heartless. At that point, I realized this wasn't going to be a quick conversation. They were all just waiting for me to crack, hoping I'd feel bad enough to change my mind. But I knew if I gave in now, they'd never leave. It would just be more excuses, more drama, and more pressure. I had to stand my ground no matter how bad it felt. My mom started crying even harder, saying things like, "I don't know where we'll go. We have no money saved up for this." I had to bite my tongue to stop myself from saying what I was really thinking, which was maybe you should have thought of that before letting this go on for so long. But I knew that wouldn't help. Instead, I just said, "I'm sorry, but I need this space back. You have to find another option." She switched tactics then, asking if she could have a little more time. "Just 1 more month," she said, her voice all shaky. "We'll definitely find something by then." I almost felt myself wavering for a second, but then I remembered how she'd used that same tone before. It was always about getting more time, more leeway, but nothing ever really changed. If I gave her another month, I'd be in the exact same spot when that time ran out. So I told her, "I've already given you the time I could. I can't wait any longer." Rob, of course, started ranting again about how I was kicking them out with nowhere to go, but I just kept repeating myself. "This is my house. I'm taking it back." Over and over like a broken record because I knew they were trying to wear me down. Then Rob's stepdaughter, the one who's pregnant, came out onto the porch, holding her stomach and looking like she was about to burst into tears. She said, "Please, we don't have anywhere to go. I'm about to have a baby. We need a roof over our heads. And man, that one was rough. It's hard not to feel something when you see a scared, pregnant teenager begging you for help. But I reminded myself that it wasn't my responsibility. It sucked, but I had to focus on what was best for me. I said, I'm really sorry, but I've given as much time as I can. I hope you find somewhere soon. And with that, I turned and walked away. My mom called after me, screaming about how she'd never forgive me for this, but I kept walking. I knew if I stopped, if I turned around and saw her face again, I'd start to doubt myself. When I got back to my car, I felt this mix of emotions. Part of me felt relieved, like I'd finally taken control and made the decision I needed to. But another part of me felt like absolute garbage. It's one thing to tell yourself you're doing the right thing, but it's a whole other thing to feel it when everyone around you is saying you're wrong. I sat in my car for a while, just trying to breathe and not let everything sink in too much. I knew they were angry, and I knew they were probably talking behind my back, but I had to keep telling myself that I was doing what I needed to for my future. My dad left me these properties for a reason, and I wasn't going to let guilt and pressure ruin that. When I finally drove off, I felt a bit lighter. It wasn't easy, and I knew there'd be more backlash to come, but I'd taken the first step. I'd stood my ground, and now it was up to them to figure things out. I wasn't going to let them drag me down with their problems. I had plans, and I was going to stick to them, no matter how many people tried to guilt trip me. The rest of the day, I focused on my renovation plans. I set up meetings with the contractor, went over the designs, and started getting things in motion. It felt good, like I was finally moving forward with my life. Yeah, there was still that weight of everything that happened, but I knew I'd done the right thing. I wasn't going to let anyone tell me otherwise. Story 5. This story is titled, My Parents Begged Me to Come Home for Christmas after they took my college fund to pay for my sister. So I took my revenge and now they are begging. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey guys, 28 female, need to get this off my chest. It's kind of a long story, but I need to write it down somewhere. I'm Mel, and I haven't talked to my parents or my sister, I'll call her Jen, in 8 years. Not really sure how to start this, but here goes. I work at this big investment firm downtown. You know those tall buildings with the fancy lobbies where everyone's wearing suits? Yeah, one of those. I'm good at my job, saved up enough to buy a place, and I'm married to Dan, 32 male, who's this really great lawyer. Honestly, life's pretty good now, but it wasn't always like this. Growing up, it was always about my sister Jen. She's 3 years older, and my parents treated her like she was perfect. Every little thing she did was amazing to them. Got a C+ in math? At least she tried her best. Dropped out of college? College isn't for everyone. Got married at 19 to some guy she met at a gas station? Young love is so beautiful. Meanwhile, I was busting my butt getting straight A's, working part-time at this boring office supply store, and trying to get into a good college. But nothing I did was ever enough. Like, I could have discovered the cure for cancer and they would have been like, that's nice, honey, but did you see Jen's new hair color? The real problem started when I got my college acceptance letter. I had a partial scholarship to study finance, which was huge for me. I'd been planning this forever. My grandma, Dad's mom, had left some money specifically for my education. It wasn't a ton, but combined with my scholarship and savings, it would have covered everything. I remember running home that day, thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd finally be proud of me. Found my mom sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like always. Dad was in his usual chair watching TV. Mom, Dad, I got in. I showed them the letter. Mom barely looked up. That's nice, honey. So, can we talk about the college fund? You know, grandma's money. That's when Dad turned off the TV. Never a good sign. About that, he started, doing that thing where he wouldn't look at me. We had to use that money for something else. I felt like someone had dumped ice water on me. What do you mean? Well, Jen's wedding is coming up, and you know how expensive weddings are these. I just stood there, trying to process what I was hearing. They'd taken my college fund, the money my grandma left specifically for my education, and spent it on Jen's third wedding. Yeah, you read that right. Third. She'd already had 2 failed marriages by 23. I lost it. Started yelling about how unfair it was, how they always picked Jen over me. Mom got defensive, saying I was being selfish and should be happy for my sister. Dad just sat there looking uncomfortable, like he always did when there was conflict. That night, I packed my bags and left. Only took what could fit in my car. I drove to my Aunt Pat's house. She's my mom's sister, but they barely talk because Mom says she's too opinionated. Translation, Aunt Pat actually calls them out on their BS. Aunt Pat took me in without question. Found out later that she'd been saving money for her son's college fund, but he'd passed away in a car accident a few years before. She offered to help me with college, but I only accepted on the condition that I'd pay back every cent. College was rough. Really rough. I was taking full-time classes while working at this cafe that always smelled like burnt coffee. Had to maintain a certain GPA to keep my scholarship, so I basically lived in the library. But you know what? I did it. Graduated with honors, got a job at the investment firm where I still work, and paid back every cent to Aunt Pat within 2 years. That's also where I met Dan. He was handling some legal stuff for the firm, and we kept running into each other in the break room. He asked me out for coffee, and the rest is history. We got married last year, bought a house, and things were finally going well. I hadn't talked to my family in all this time. Like, zero contact. No calls, no emails, nothing. Jen had my number but never used it. My parents sent a card when I graduated, probably because Aunt Pat told them, but that was it. So yeah, that's the background. Had to explain all this, so what happened next makes sense. But it all started last Christmas. I know I should have seen it coming because my Aunt Pat was acting weird for days. Like, she'd start saying something on the phone, then stop herself. But I was too busy with work to really notice. Dan and I had this tradition of spending Christmas Eve at Aunt Pat's. She makes these amazing cinnamon rolls that make the whole house smell incredible, and we usually just hang out, watch movies, and open one present each at midnight. It's chill, you know? So we show up at her place around 6 p.m. I'm carrying this huge tray of my attempt at sweet potato casserole, probably not as good as hers, but I try. And Dan's got the gifts. The moment I opened the door, I knew something was wrong. There were too many coats on the rack, too many shoes by the door. Then I heard them. My mom's laugh, my dad's voice, my sister Jen talking loudly about something. I literally froze in the doorway. Dan walked right into me because I stopped so suddenly. The casserole almost went flying. 8 years. It had been 8 years since I'd seen any of them. And there they were, sitting in Aunt Pat's living room like they belonged there. Mom's hair was mostly gray now. She used to dye it religiously. Dad had gotten pretty heavy. And Jen, well, Jen looked exactly the same, except now she had 2 kids I'd never met clinging to her legs. Aunt Pat came rushing over, looking like she was about to cry. Mel, I'm so sorry. They just showed up an hour ago. I tried to call, but your phone went straight to voicemail. My phone was in my bag, on silent cause of work stuff. Great timing, right? I couldn't move. Like, physically couldn't make my feet work. Dan put his hand on my back and whispered, "We can leave if you want." But before I could answer, my mom spotted me. Mel, sweetheart. She came rushing over like we'd seen each other yesterday. Tried to hug me and everything. I stepped back so fast I bumped into Dan again. What are you doing here? My voice came out weird. Too high. It's Christmas. Mom said it like that explained everything. Family should be together on Christmas. Dad was still sitting in his chair, doing that awkward half-wave thing. Jen was busy with her kids, but I could see her watching me. The kids, God, I didn't even know their names then, looked confused. The older one, a boy around 7, whispered something to Jen, probably asking who I was. I went straight to the kitchen. Needed to put down the casserole before I dropped it. Needed to breathe. The kitchen had always been my safe space at Aunt Pat's house. I'd spent so many hours here doing homework or helping her bake. Dan followed me in. He's good like that. Always knows when I need backup. You okay? I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak. Aunt Pat came in looking miserable. They showed up saying they wanted to make things right. I told them it wasn't a good idea to surprise you like this. But you know your mother. Yeah, I did know my mother. Queen of doing whatever she wanted and dealing with the consequences later. I could hear the kids playing in the living room now. Someone had turned on Christmas music. It all felt so wrong, like I'd walked into some parallel universe where the last 8 years hadn't happened. Should we go? Dan asked again. He was already reaching for his car keys. I almost said yes, really wanted to say yes. But then I looked at Aunt Pat's face. She decorated everything so nicely, made all this food, and now she was caught in the middle of this mess. No, I said finally. This is our tradition. I'm not letting them ruin it. Dan nodded. He gets me, you know? Aunt Pat squeezed my hand. Just give me a minute, I said, heading for the back door. Needed some air. It was freezing outside. I hadn't grabbed my coat, but the cold felt good. Helped clear my head. I could see through the kitchen window, everyone moving around inside, looking so normal, like a regular family on Christmas Eve. That's when my mom came out. Didn't even bring a coat for me. Typical. You're going to catch cold, she said. Like she'd been saying that to me every day for the past 8 years. Like she had any right to act like my mother now. I had so many questions. Why now? Why like this? Why not call first? But what came out was, why are you really here? Well, she started, doing that thing where she takes forever to get to the point. It's about Jen. Of course it was about Jen. When wasn't it about Jen? What about her? She's going through some changes. I waited. Mom always does this, talks in circles until someone makes her get to the point. Finally, she said, Jen's getting divorced again. I just stared at her. Like, was that supposed to be news? Jen getting divorced was like the sun rising, happened pretty regularly. And, I said, and she needs some time to rebuild her life, to find herself. Something in her tone made me nervous. What does that have to do with me? That's when Dad came out. Still no coat for me, BTW. He had this look on his face, the same one he had when he told me they'd spent my college fund. Mel, he said, trying to sound all businesslike. You've done well for yourself. Good job, nice house, stable marriage. I didn't like where this was going. At all. I thought they came to apologize or feel some regret. But no, even after all these years, they still want to use me to help Jan. We were thinking, Mom jumped in, maybe you could take Ben and Lisa for a while. I legit thought I'd heard wrong. Take them? Just until Jen gets back on her feet, Dad added quickly. She needs time to sort things out, find a new place, maybe go back to school. I stood there trying to process what they were saying. They wanted me, who they hadn't spoken to in 8 years, to take custody of Jen's kids. Are you serious right now? It makes perfect sense, Mom said, like she was suggesting I water her plants while she was on vacation. You've got that big house, Dan's got a good job, and you work from home sometimes. I work from home like twice a month. Still, the kids would have stability, structure, and Jen really needs this chance to what? I interrupted. Party? Find husband number 4? Mom's face got all pinched. That's not fair. Not fair? I laughed, but not because anything was funny. You know what's not fair? Showing up at Christmas after 8 years of silence and asking me to raise someone else's kids? Dad tried to step in. Now, Mel, number just no. Where's Jen anyway? Why isn't she asking me herself? Right on cue, Jen appeared in the doorway. She must have been listening the whole time. There you are, she said, like we were all just hanging out. I was wondering where everyone went. The kids were with her, Ben looking sleepy, and Lisa clutching this stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. These are your aunt and uncle, Jen told them, pointing at me and Dan, who'd quietly appeared behind me with my coat. Aunt Mel and Uncle Dan. The kids just stared at us. Can't blame them. Ben's 7, Lisa's 5, Jen continued, like she was introducing her pets or something. They're really good kids, super independent. Ben can even make his own breakfast. The way she said it, like that was a selling point, made my stomach hurt. A 7-year-old shouldn't have to make his own breakfast. Dan spoke up for the first time. This seems like something that needs more discussion. Maybe not on Christmas Eve? Bless him for trying to be diplomatic, but Jen wasn't having it. What's there to discuss? You guys have everything. Big house, good jobs, no kids. It's perfect. I just need 6 months, maybe a year tops. A year? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Well, yeah, gotta get my life together, you know? Maybe travel a bit, figure out what I want. What about their dad? I asked. Jen waved her hand dismissively. Oh, he's useless. Probably in Vegas or something. I had to ask. Which one? Dad, number 1, 2, or 3? Mom gasped. Mel! But Jen just laughed. Number 2? Number 1 moved to Canada, and number 3? Well, that marriage got annulled, so he doesn't really count. I couldn't deal with this. Turned to go inside, but Jen grabbed my arm. Come on, sis. Help me out here. I need this. I'm suffocating. I looked at her hand on my arm, looked at the kids, looked at my parents who were watching this whole thing like it was going to work out just the way they planned. No, one simple word should have been the end of it. After that disaster of a Christmas Eve, I thought things would calm down. Like maybe they'd get the message and leave us alone. Yeah, I was wrong. Jen started showing up at our house. At first, it was just random visits with the kids. She'd bring them over saying stuff like, they should get to know their aunt and uncle. I felt bad for Ben and Lee, so I'd let them in. They're actually sweet kids when Jen isn't around. But then the visits got weird. She started coming alone, always when she knew Dan would be working from home. I didn't think much of it at first. Dan works from home on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I'm usually at the office those days. It was our neighbor who first said something. She's this older lady who lives next door and basically sees everything that happens on our street. She caught me getting my mail one day and was like, "Your sister sure dresses up to visit your husband." I was confused. What do you mean? Oh, always wearing those little dresses when she comes by. Even in this cold. And she stays for hours sometimes. That's when things clicked. All those times Jen just happened to stop by when Dan was home alone, always needing his legal advice about her divorce. I asked Dan about it that night. He looked really uncomfortable, which isn't like him at all. I was going to tell you, he said. It's been getting inappropriate. Turns out Jen had been hardcore flirting with him for weeks. She'd show up in these tiny outfits, always finding excuses to lean over his desk or touch his arm. Dan kept trying to be professional because 1, he's a decent human being, and 2, she's technically his client for the custody stuff we're dealing with. But the last straw? She literally told him, and I quote, "You know, if you ever get tired of the boring version, you could always upgrade to the fun sister." The boring version. She meant me. My own sister called me boring while hitting on my husband. Dan shut it down immediately, told her she needed to find different legal representation, and that she wasn't welcome at our house anymore when I wasn't home. I was furious, called Jen right away. She picked up all cheerful like nothing was wrong. "Hey, sis! I was just thinking about stopping by tomorrow." "Stay away from my husband," she laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, come on, we were just having fun. Dan's been so helpful with all this legal stuff." "Jen, I swear to God, you're overreacting." "Besides, it's not my fault if Dan finds me attractive. I mean, we all know I was always the pretty one." I hung up, called my parents because surely, they'd see how messed up this was. Mom's response? "You know how Jen gets when she's stressed. Maybe if you'd agreed to take the kids, she wouldn't be acting out like this." I can't even make this stuff up. Dan suggested we install security cameras, said we might need evidence of her behavior for what he thinks is coming. "He's dealt with enough custody cases to recognize the signs," he said. I wanted to believe he was wrong. I wanted to believe Jen would at least pretend to be a decent mother, if not for herself, then for her kids. But Dan was right. The next morning, we woke up to the doorbell ringing, over and over. Something felt wrong. I got up and pulled open the curtains, and there they were, Jen's kids, Ben and Lisa, sitting on our front steps. No jackets, no gloves, just 2 small suitcases beside them, and Lisa clutching that beat-up stuffed rabbit like it was the only thing keeping her together. I bolted for the door, barely aware that Dan was right behind me. The second I opened it, the freezing air hit me like a slap, but it didn't matter. Ben stood up stiffly, rubbing his arms. "Aunt Mel?" His voice was too quiet, too resigned, like he already knew he wasn't supposed to expect much from adults. Dan was already scooping Lisa up, rubbing her frozen hands between his. I grabbed Ben's suitcase. It was light, too light. When I opened it later, I'd find just a few shirts, some underwear, and nothing else. Then I saw the note. It was crumpled in Ben's tiny fist. He hesitated before handing it to me, like he was already bracing for disappointment. I unfolded it with shaking hands. "They're your problem now. I need to live my life. Jen." I felt the ground drop out from under me. For a second, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process the sheer cruelty. She left them. She actually left them. Like they were some inconvenient baggage she could just dump and forget about. I clenched the note so hard it nearly ripped. I was shaking with rage, with disbelief, with something so raw I couldn't even name it. Dan's voice was tight with barely contained fury. "Get them inside. Now." I scooped up Ben, even though he was too big to carry, and slammed the door shut behind us. Jen was gone, and she wasn't coming back. After that, Dan went into full lawyer mode. He's usually pretty laid back, but I've never seen him so angry. He got the kids inside while I grabbed their suitcases. The bags were barely packed, like a couple of t-shirts and some underwear thrown in. Lisa's stuffed rabbit was there, thankfully. She can't sleep without it. We documented everything, took photos of the note, the suitcases, everything. Thank God for our security cameras. They caught Jen dropping the kids off at 4:30 a.m. and driving away in her beat-up Honda. While I was making the kids breakfast, they were starving. Hadn't eaten since dinner the night before. Dan was making calls. Like, a lot of calls. He contacted CPS first, then the police to file a report. Then his law partner who specializes in family cases. My parents showed up around noon. Turns out Jen had texted them saying, "Kids are with Mel now, all good." Like it was totally normal to dump your children on someone's doorstep and disappear. Mom started with her usual excuses. "Jen's just overwhelmed. She needs time. She'll come back when she's ready." Dan shut that down real quick. "This isn't about Jen anymore. This is child abandonment. It's a crime." Dad tried arguing. "But they're family. We can handle this privately." "No," Dan said. "We're doing this by the book. Those kids deserve better than being pawns in Jen's games." That's when my mom started crying. "But if you report her, she'll get in trouble." "Yeah," I said. "That's kind of the point." The kids were watching TV in the other room, but I know they could hear everything. Ben kept looking over at us with this worried expression. He's way too used to adult problems for a 7-year-old. CPS showed up around 2 p.m. They interviewed all of us, took pictures, checked the house. The social worker was really nice. She talked to Ben and Lisa alone for a bit. When she came out, she looked seriously concerned. Turns out this isn't the first time Jen's pulled something like this. She's left them with random friends before, sometimes for days. Ben's been taking care of Lisa since he was 6. He makes her breakfast, helps her dress, makes sure she brushes her teeth. No kid should have to be a parent to their sibling. We tried tracking Jen down, called everyone we could think of. Finally, one of her friends cracked and told us, Jen had bought a plane ticket to Las Vegas. She's apparently moving in with some guy she met online gaming. She didn't even tell her kids goodbye. Dan's filed for emergency temporary custody. Says it's the fastest way to make sure the kids are legally protected while everything gets sorted out. CPS agrees. They don't want to put the kids in the system if there's stable family willing to take them. My parents keep calling, begging us not to ruin Jen's life. They don't get it. Jen ruined her own life. We're just making sure she can't ruin her kids' lives too. Right now, we're waiting on a court date. The kids are staying with us until then. Dan's converted his home office into a temporary bedroom for them. He's amazing with them. Helped Ben with his math homework tonight, and read Lisa 3 bedtime stories until she finally fell asleep. I'm scared, not gonna lie. We didn't plan on becoming parents like this. But looking at these kids sleeping on our couch, how could anyone just abandon them? The social worker's coming back tomorrow. I'll update then. Update 1. Update on the situation with my sister abandoning her kids. Check previous post for background. Quick update on the Jen situation. She's still in Vegas, posting pics of herself at pools and casinos, like she didn't just abandon her kids. Meanwhile, things with my parents got even messier. So CPS called a family meeting yesterday. We all sat down at this big table in Dan's office. The kids were with Aunt Pat, thank God, because what happened was rough. The social worker started explaining how the system works, talking about temporary guardianship and stuff. My parents kept nodding like they were following along, until she got to the part about Jen potentially facing criminal charges. Mom lost it, started crying about how everyone makes mistakes, and she's still their mother. Then the social worker dropped the bomb. Given the circumstances, we need to discuss permanent placement options. Mr. and Mrs., my parents' last name, as the maternal grandparents, you would be the first choice before we consider foster care. You guys should have seen their faces. Dad started stammering. Oh no, we can't. We're too old. We don't have the space. Mom jumped in. Besides, Mel and Dan have that big house. They're young. They have money. It was like watching history repeat itself. Same excuses, different situation. Reminded me of that day they told me they'd spent my college fund on Jen's wedding. Dan, bless him, wasn't having any of their excuses. Actually, he said, pulling out some papers, your house has 4 bedrooms. You recently took out a home equity loan to renovate your kitchen, so finances aren't the issue. And according to state law, as grandparents, you're legally obligated to be considered first for placement. My dad got all red in the face. Now see here, young man. No, you see here, Dan cut in. He never raises his voice, but man, when he uses his lawyer tone, people listen. Your daughter abandoned her children and threw them at us. She's in Vegas spending money on hotels while her 7-year-old son is acting as a parent to his 5-year-old sister. This isn't about what's convenient for you. It's about those kids. Mom tried again. But Mel, stop it, I said. All those old feelings from the college fund thing came rushing back. Stop trying to make me fix Jen's messes. You did this her whole life. Cleaned up after her, made excuses, pushed her responsibilities onto me. Not anymore. Then the social worker cleared her throat. If you're unwilling to take custody, we'll need to document your refusal. This will be part of the court record, and if no relatives step up, the kids will enter foster care system. That got their attention. See, my parents care a lot about what people think of them. It's why they spent so much on Jen's wedding. Had to keep up appearances. Document? Mom looked horrified. You mean this would be on record? Yes, the caseworker said calmly. It will be officially noted that you declined custody of your grandchildren. While it won't be publicly accessible, it will be part of the case file and legal record. Mom's face paled. So, people could find out? If it comes up in court or an official inquiry, yes. And if a family member chooses to share it, there's nothing stopping them. Mom's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. The next hour was wild. My parents tried everything. Guilt trips, crying, even offering me money. Ironic, right? By the end of the meeting, my parents had signed temporary custody papers. They're picking up the kids tomorrow. Ms. T's going to do weekly checks. Dan's made sure they can't just pass the kids back to Jen if she shows up. Everything has to go through the courts now. I feel weird about it. Like, I know it's the right thing for the kids. They need stability. But watching my parents do the right thing only because they were forced to brings back a lot of old stuff. Ben asked me earlier if this meant he didn't have to be in charge of Lisa anymore. God, these kids deserved so much better. I don't know how things will move from now on. Let's just hope for better. But I'll keep you guys updated. Final update. Update to the ongoing situation with my sister abandoning her kids. See previous posts. Okay, Reddit. Got a lot to update you guys on. Remember how Jen was living it up in Vegas? Yeah, that didn't last long. Dan's law firm worked with local authorities to track her down. Turns out she was staying at some cheap motel off the strip with this guy she met gaming, not the fancy resort she was posting pics from. She was just hanging around the nice hotels taking selfies and pretending she was staying there. The cops showed up at her motel room on Tuesday morning. According to the report, she tried saying she was just taking a vacation, and the kids were perfectly fine with their sister. The officers weren't impressed. They brought her back yesterday. Not gonna lie, seeing her in handcuffs was weird. She didn't look like the confident sister who'd been hitting on my husband and demanding we raise her kids. She looked small, scared. The charges are pretty serious. Child abandonment, child neglect, from before she left them with us. Child endangerment. Some other legal stuff I don't fully understand, but Dan says are bad. The DA's office interviewed Ben and Lisa last week. They're doing this thing called a forensic interview, where they talk to kids about abuse or neglect. Ben told them everything. How he's been taking care of Lisa since he was 6, how Jen would leave them alone for days, how they sometimes didn't have food in the house because she spent the money on herself. Lisa started crying during her interview when they asked about meals, said she was scared they'd have to go hungry again. I had to leave the room. My parents are freaking out. They keep trying to get Dan to make this go away. He flat out refused. Told them if they try to interfere with the legal process, they could lose custody of the kids too. Mom tried the whole, but she's mentally ill excuse. Yeah, no. Jen's not mentally ill. She's just selfish. Always has been. They're doing a psych eval anyway as part of the case, but Dan says it's standard procedure. The gaming guy from Vegas? Turns out he had no idea Jen even had kids. She told him she was this rich single girl looking for adventure. He actually contacted Dan's office when he found out the truth, wanting to help with the case. Sent screenshots of all their conversations where she bragged about having no responsibilities and being totally free. Jen's not talking to any of us now. Her court-appointed lawyer told her to stay quiet, but she did send me this long text last night. You happy now? You finally got everyone to notice you instead of me. Bet you planned this whole thing. You were always jealous that Mom and Dad loved me more. Well, congrats. Hope you're satisfied now that you've ruined my life. I didn't respond. What's there to say? She abandoned her kids on my doorstep in the middle of winter. She did this to herself. They even searched her motel room. They found receipts for designer clothes and expensive restaurants. She had money. She just chose to spend it on herself instead of her kids. And yeah, it's been 6 months since everything went down with Jen. The court case finally wrapped up last week. Jen took a plea deal. She's getting 18 months in state prison with possibility of parole after 12 months, plus 5 years probation after release. She also lost all parental rights. The judge wasn't playing around, said something about how the systematic neglect and final abandonment showed a complete disregard for her children's well-being. My parents actually got their act together, which honestly surprised everyone. I think finally seeing all the evidence in court, hearing what Ben and Lisa had been through, it changed something. Mom actually stood up in court and said Jen needed to face consequence. Never thought I'd see that happen. The kids are doing better. Like, actually better. Not just putting on a brave face better. They're still living with my parents, but there's been a complete change in how things work. My parents had to take parenting classes as part of the custody agreement. Dan's idea. He's scary smart about this stuff. They've set up proper bedrooms, got the kids into good schools, and taken them to therapy every week. My parents tried reaching out after everything settled. Dad sent this long email about how sorry he was about the college fund, how he sees things differently now. Mom keeps trying to call, saying she wants to start fresh. But you know what? Some things you can't just apologize away. 8 years of silence, then they only show up when they need something? Nah, I'm done. Aunt Pat's been amazing through all this. She visits the kids at my parents' house regularly, makes sure they're actually taking care of them properly. The kids adore her. They call her Grandma Pat, which honestly feels more right than my parents being grandparents. Jen's in prison where she belongs. She sent me this dramatic letter full of excuses and self-pity, talking about how prison changed her and how she sees everything differently now. Not one word asking about her kids. Classic Jen. It's still all about her. That letter went straight in the trash. Dan and I see the kids every other weekend, but not at my parents' house. We pick them up and take them out. Movies, parks, normal aunt and uncle stuff. Ben asked me last week if I was mad at my parents. Told him the truth, that grown-ups sometimes have complicated feelings about each other, but that doesn't change how much we love him and Lisa. People keep asking if I'll ever forgive my parents or Jen. Honestly, some things you can't come back from. Yeah, they're taking care of the kids now, but only because they were forced to. They haven't changed. They just ran out of options. So, here we are. The kids are safe. They have stability, even if it's not the perfect situation. As for my parents, we keep it strictly about the kids. No personal conversations, no unnecessary drama. Sometimes distance is the healthiest choice. And as for me, well, life moves forward. And oh, I found out that I'm pregnant, and Dan is over the moon. Edit. Thanks for all the support through this crazy journey, Reddit. You guys helped more than you know. Edit 2. Yes, Ben and Lisa know they can call us anytime. We got them their own phones. kids' versions with parental controls, specifically for this. Edit 3. To everyone asking, the cats still love having the kids over for weekends. Ben's actually helping me teach the new kitten tricks. Final edit. This account is probably going dark after this post. Dan says it's better not to have too many details online once everything is finalized. Just know we're all doing okay. Story 6. This story is titled, Sister Gets Pregnant, and her boyfriend dumps her, but parents punish me and send me away to another state. 10 years later, karma strikes and now they need my help. Hey everyone. Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. So I'm 24 male now, but this all started when I was 14. My sister Emma, 17 female at the time, now 27, has always been the golden child in our family. Our parents, dad 45 male, mom 43 female, basically worshiped the ground she walked on. But things got way worse when Emma announced she was pregnant with her loser boyfriend Tyler's 19 male baby. You'd think my parents would be pissed, right? Nope. Mom actually hugged her and started crying about how she was going to be a young grandma and how blessed our family was. Meanwhile, Dad just sat there staring at his plate, not saying a word. Classic dad move. He never stands up to Mom, ever. I remember sitting there at the dinner table literally with my mouth hanging open. Like, are you kidding me? If I had told them I got some girl pregnant at 14, they'd probably have shipped me off to military school or something. But Emma? Nah, she gets a hug and congratulations. That pretty much sums up my entire childhood. Emma has always been the golden child. When I got a C in math last semester, I lost my gaming privileges for a month. When Emma failed 2 classes last year, Mom said she was going through a lot emotionally and bought her a new phone to cheer her up. The double standards in this house are insane. I could write a freaking novel about all the times she got special treatment, but I'll spare you guys the details. And Tyler? This dude is the definition of a deadbeat. He's been fired from like 4 jobs in the past year. Last Christmas, he actually showed up with a gift for Emma that still had the security tag on it. We all pretended not to notice, but like, come on, dude. He shows up at our house uninvited, raids our fridge, and talks to my parents like they owe him something. He's got this stupid neck tattoo that says, "No regrets." Ironic if considering his life choices. And he drives this beat-up Honda that makes our whole street smell like burning oil. The first time Tyler came over for dinner was about 3 months before the pregnancy announcement. I remember him bragging about how he doesn't believe in college because entrepreneurs don't need degrees. Meanwhile, this guy was literally working at a car wash and living in his mom's basement. But my parents just nodded along like he was dropping wisdom or something. Dad would occasionally glance at me with this look that said, "Is this guy for real?" But he never said anything. I tried to warn my parents about Tyler. One time I overheard him on the phone in our backyard, talking about how he'd been kicked out of his previous girlfriend's place for borrowing her dad's credit card. When I told my mom, she just said, "People deserve second chances, honey. Tyler is going through a rough patch. A rough patch that apparently lasted his entire life. The thing about growing up as the less favored child is that you start to doubt yourself. For years, I wondered if I was just imagining things. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe if I was more like Emma, outgoing, popular, pretty, my parents would treat me the same way. I tried so hard to get their attention. I got good grades, mostly, kept my room clean, even joined clubs I thought would impress them. Nothing worked. Emma could burn the house down and they'd probably blame it on faulty wiring. I remember this one time when I was 12 and Emma was 15. We both had events on the same night, my science fair and her chorus concert. Guess which one my parents attended? Yep, they went to watch Emma sing one line in a group number while I stood alone next to my project on renewable energy that had taken me weeks to complete. My teacher kept asking where my parents were, and I just said they were stuck in traffic. They didn't even bother to come by afterward. I won second place, by the way. Not that they ever knew or cared. About a week after the pregnancy announcement, Mom called a family meeting, which I knew meant bad news for me. Emma showed up 20 minutes late, as usual, whining about how her back hurt from carrying a human life. Mom immediately jumped up to get her special pregnancy pillow, while I just rolled my eyes. They made us all sit in the living room, with Mom and Dad on the big couch, Emma sprawled out on the love seat, and me stuck in that uncomfortable wooden chair from the dining room. Yeah, even the seating arrangements in our house were a metaphor for where I stood in the family hierarchy. Then they dropped the bomb. With the baby coming, they needed to rethink our living arrangements. Basically, I was being shipped off to live with my grandparents in Florida, so Emma could use my room as a nursery. It's only temporary, Mom said, not even looking me in the eye. Emma needs our support system right now. I looked at Dad hoping he'd say something, anything, to defend me. He just mumbled, "It'll be good for you to spend time with Grandpa and Grandma. They have that nice pool. Like a freaking pool makes up for being exiled from my own home." Emma actually had the nerve to say, "You should be grateful. At least you don't have to deal with midnight feedings and diaper smell." Then she laughed and added, "Plus, I've always wanted your room. It gets better sunlight for the baby." I remember just sitting there, completely stunned. They were discussing my entire future, like I wasn't even in the room. Like I was some piece of furniture they could just relocate when it became inconvenient. I kept waiting for someone to say, "Just kidding," or offer some alternative, but it never came. "When exactly am I supposed to leave?" I finally asked, my voice cracking embarrassingly. "Well," Mom said, checking her calendar on her phone, "Grandma and Grandpa said you could come anytime, but we thought maybe after the school year ends. That gives you about 6 weeks to say goodbye to your friends." 6 weeks. Like that was some generous time frame to completely uproot my life. I had lived in our town my entire life. All my friends were here. My school, my teachers, the comic book store where I hung out on weekends, the park where I was just starting to get decent at skateboarding. Everything I knew was here. "Do I get any say in this?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Honey," Mom said with that fake sympathy voice she uses when she's pretending to care, "sometimes families have to make tough decisions. This is what's best for everyone." "Everyone except me," I muttered. "Don't be so dramatic," Emma said, rolling her eyes. "It's not like you're being sent to prison. Florida has beaches and stuff." I still remember the exact moment when I realized I was completely disposable to my family. It was when my mom started talking about how they'd repaint my room, which I'd just gotten to paint dark blue last year after begging for ages, to a nice sunny yellow for the baby. She was already planning which of my posters would come down and where the crib would go, all while I was sitting right there. "But what about my school? My friends? The soccer team tryouts?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from cracking. "You'll make new friends," Mom said dismissively. "And Florida schools are probably better anyway." I looked at Emma, hoping for at least some sign that she felt bad about this whole situation. She was texting someone, not even paying attention to the conversation that was literally changing my entire life. When she finally looked up, she just said, "Can we wrap this up? I'm meeting Tyler for dinner." That night, I locked myself in my room and cried for the first time in years. Not that anyone noticed or cared. The next few weeks were hell. Emma started moving baby stuff into my room before I even packed. She and Mom went on shopping sprees for baby clothes, while I was told we needed to budget when I asked for new sneakers for Florida. One day, I came home from school and found my bookshelf had been emptied, with all my books shoved into cardboard boxes in the hallway. When I asked what was going on, Mom said, "Oh, we need the shelf for the baby's things. You weren't taking those books to Florida anyway, right? We'll store them in the attic." Those books were my escape. I'd saved up for years buying them at garage sales and from the used bookstore downtown. Some had notes in the margins, little thoughts I'd had while reading, and now they were just being packed away like they meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. Tyler started hanging around more too, acting like he owned our house. One day I caught him wearing my favorite Bulls hoodie. When I called him out, he just shrugged and said, "Chill, little man, you won't need warm clothes in Florida anyway." I wanted to punch him so bad. The worst part was that my mom saw this happen and said nothing. Actually, that's not true. She told me to stop making a scene when I demanded my hoodie back. Tyler just smirked behind her back. I never got that hoodie back, by the way. I bet he sold it or lost it somewhere. Things just kept getting worse. My mom and Emma started having these conversations about the baby right in front of me, like I was invisible. They'd talk about how they'd convert my desk area into a changing station, or how they'd need to get rid of my bed to make room for the crib, just completely erasing any trace that I had ever existed in that space. I tried to talk to my friends about what was happening, but they didn't really get it. Most of them thought moving to Florida sounded cool. "Dude, you'll live right by the beach." Or, "Maybe you'll see an alligator." They didn't understand that I was basically being kicked out of my own family. My best friend Alex was the only one who seemed to really get how messed up it was. "That's some serious bullshit, man," he said when I told him. "They can't just ship you off because your sister got knocked up. That's not your fault." It felt good to have someone validate what I was feeling, but it didn't change anything. I was still being sent away, and nobody who could actually do anything about it seemed to care. I tried talking to Dad alone one night when he was in the garage organizing his tools. "Dad, this isn't fair. Why do I have to leave? Why can't Emma and Tyler get their own place?" Dad just sighed and looked tired. "Sometimes in families we have to make sacrifices. Your mom thinks this is best for everyone. But what do you think? I pushed. He just shook his head. What I think doesn't matter much around here, son. You know that. I saw something in his eyes that night. This defeated look that made me realize he'd given up fighting my mom years ago. Maybe before I was even born. It was like looking at my future if I stayed in this toxic environment, and it scared the hell out of me. I tried one last-ditch effort to stay. I went to my guidance counselor at school and explained the situation, hoping maybe she could talk to my parents or something. She seemed concerned and called them in for a meeting. But of course, my mom just put on her perfect parent act, talking about how this was a wonderful opportunity for me to bond with my grandparents, and how they were making this sacrifice as a family. The counselor bought it completely. As we were leaving her office, Mom squeezed my shoulder so hard it hurt and whispered, "Don't ever try to embarrass this family again." The final straw was overhearing Emma on the phone with her friend. She was laughing and saying, "Yeah, it's perfect. The brat is getting shipped off so the baby gets a whole nursery. Mom already promised to help with night feeding so I can still hang out sometimes." That's when I knew I was just an inconvenience to them, a problem they could solve by sending me away. To Emma, I wasn't a brother who was having his life uprooted. I was just the brat who was in the way of her perfect little setup. The day before I left, I decided to go see my old treehouse in the woods behind our neighborhood. My dad and I had built it when I was 7, one of the few times he'd actually spent real quality time with me. It was nothing fancy, just some plywood and 2x4s, but it had been my special place for years. I hadn't been up there in a while, had kind of outgrown it, but suddenly it seemed important to go there one last time. When I got there, I found that someone had pulled down the ladder and spray-painted "Tyler was here" across the front. The small window was broken, and there were beer cans and cigarette butts inside. I sat there for hours, just staring at this symbol of my childhood that had been invaded and ruined, just like everything else in my life. My last night at home, nobody even made a special dinner or anything. Mom was busy helping Emma register for baby gifts online. Dad watched TV in silence. I ordered a pizza with my own money and ate it alone in my nearly empty room, sitting on the floor since my bed had already been disassembled to make room for the crib that had been delivered that morning. So I moved to Florida to live with my grandparents when I was 14, right before starting high school. Living with Grandma, 68 female, and Grandpa, 70 male, wasn't terrible. They treated me way better than my own parents did. But starting high school in a new state where I knew literally nobody sucked major ass. I was the new kid with the weird accent. Apparently I have a northern accent in Florida. My first day at school, some kid asked where I was from and why I'd moved. When I explained that my pregnant sister needed my room, he looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "Dude, that's messed up," he said. It was the first time anyone had validated that what happened to me wasn't normal or okay. I nearly cried right there in the cafeteria. The first month was rough. I kept to myself mostly, eating lunch alone and coming straight home after school. Grandma would have snacks ready and actually ask about my day. Not just a generic, "How was school?" but specific questions about my classes and teachers. It was weird having an adult actually interested in my life. One afternoon, I completely broke down while doing homework at the kitchen table. Just started sobbing out of nowhere. Grandma sat with me, not saying anything, just rubbing my back until I could breathe again. Then she said something I'll never forget. "What your parents did wasn't right, and you're allowed to be angry about it. But don't let that anger burn up everything good inside you." Grandpa was cool too. He had this workshop in the garage where he built furniture, and he started teaching me how to use the tools. Said I had good hands for detailed work. It was the first time anyone had ever complimented me on being good at something physical. Dad had never bothered to teach me that kind of stuff. The first time I built something on my own, a simple wooden box with dovetail joints, Grandpa displayed it on the mantle like it was some priceless artifact. He showed it to everyone who came over, bragging about how his grandson had made it. I pretended to be embarrassed, but honestly, it felt amazing to have someone proud of me. I barely heard from my family back home. Mom would call like once a month with awkward small talk, then spend 20 minutes showing me pictures of Emma's baby girl Olivia through FaceTime. Dad would get on for a minute at the end, just to say, "Be good for your grandparents," before hanging up. Emma never called or texted unless she needed something. The first time Emma called me directly was about 3 months after I moved. I was actually excited to see her name on my phone. Maybe she missed me? Nope. She wanted me to convince Grandma and Grandpa to send a bigger check for the baby's christening gift. I hung up on her. For my 15th birthday, my parents sent a card that arrived 3 days late. Inside was a $25 iTunes gift card and a generic message. Not even a "We miss you." Grandma and Grandpa, on the other hand, threw me an actual party with a homemade cake and took me to pick out a decent laptop for school. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. Slowly, I started to adapt to my new life. Joined the computer club at school, where I met some decent people who didn't care that I was the new kid. One guy, Marcus, lived in my grandparents' neighborhood, and we started hanging out. His parents were divorced, and he split time between households, so he kind of understood what it was like to be caught in the middle of family drama. I discovered I was actually pretty good with computers. My new laptop became my obsession. I taught myself basic programming, how to troubleshoot hardware issues, even a little graphic design. Grandpa noticed my interest and started bringing home broken electronics from yard sales for me to tinker with. Either you'll fix it, or it was already broken, so no harm done, he'd say with a wink. I worked hard in school, though. Got straight A's, joined the computer club, and got a part-time job at the local Best Buy when I turned 16. Grandpa taught me about saving money and investing. I put away every cent I could. I had this plan forming, a way to never be dependent on my parents again, to never be in a position where they could just dispose of me when I became inconvenient. Working at Best Buy was a game changer. Not only did I make decent money, but I learned a ton about different tech and how to talk to customers. My manager, Rick, took me under his wing and started giving me the more challenging repair jobs. Kids got a knack for finding the problem, he'd tell the other employees. For the first time, I felt valued for my skills. By junior year, I had actually made some good friends. Joined the track team. Started dating this girl named Melissa. She moved to California for college, but we're still friends. Life was normal. Sometimes I'd go weeks without even thinking about my parents or Emma. The pain never completely went away, but it faded from a sharp stab to a dull ache. I did go back home once, during my junior year. It was for Thanksgiving, and Grandma insisted we should all be together for the holiday. That visit was eye-opening. My old room was completely transformed. Pink walls, crib, changing table. No sign that I had ever lived there. Emma was living at home with Olivia, who was a toddler by then. Tyler was between jobs, as usual, and played video games the whole time I was there. The weirdest part was how they all acted like nothing had happened, like me being sent away was just some normal thing that families did. Mom kept saying things like, "Oh, we should show you the mall, they've renovated since you lived here," as if I'd just been away at summer camp or something. Dad was a little better. He actually apologized one night when we were alone, saying he should have handled things differently. But it was too little, too late. I couldn't wait to get back to Florida after that visit. It made me realize that my grandparents' house had become more of a home than my parents' house had ever been. When I graduated high school at 18, my parents flew down for the ceremony. It was awkward as hell. They acted like the past 4 years hadn't happened. Mom kept showing my grandparents' neighbors pictures of Olivia, now 4, and talking about how Emma was such an amazing young mother, despite all her challenges. Challenges, meaning the consequences of her own choices, by the way. Like how Tyler moved out when Olivia was 6 months old, then moved back in, then moved out again, a pattern he'd repeat about a dozen times over the years. Or how she'd gotten fired from 3 different retail jobs for always calling in sick, translation, hungover. But in my mom's eyes, Emma was still this poor, struggling angel who deserved endless support and praise just for doing the basic parenting that millions of people do every day. At graduation dinner, I announced I wasn't coming back home. I was staying in Florida, getting my own place, and starting my own computer repair business. Mom seemed shocked. Dad just nodded, like he knew this was coming all along. "But don't you want to come home?" Mom asked, genuinely confused. "Your room is still there." It wasn't my room anymore. It was Olivia's room, as I'd seen in the background of countless video calls. "No," I said simply. "My home is here now." The hurt look on her face almost made me laugh. What did she expect? That I'd be eager to return to the place where I'd been tossed aside like old furniture? That I'd want to live as a guest in what used to be my home? Grandpa pulled me aside later that night and pressed something into my hand. A check for $5,000. "Seed money," he called it, "for your business. Don't tell your grandmother. She thinks we're just helping with first month's rent on your apartment." He winked at me and added, "I believe in you, kid." That night, I realized something important. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who make room for you in their lives, who see your value, who believe in you. By that definition, my grandparents were more family to me than my parents and sister had ever been. From ages 18 to 24, now, I built my computer repair business from nothing into a decent IT consulting company. I have my own condo, a new car, and actual savings. Not rich by any means, but stable and independent. Those first couple years on my own were tough. I lived in this tiny studio apartment that smelled like the Indian restaurant downstairs. I worked insane hours, doing repairs during the day, taking online classes to get certified in different systems at night, cold calling businesses to offer my services on weekends. Ramen became a food group. Sleep became optional. At first, I was just fixing people's personal computers, removing viruses, upgrading hardware, retrieving lost data. I charged less than the big repair shops, so I got a lot of business through word of mouth. I'd make house calls with my toolkit in my backpack, riding my bike because I couldn't afford a car yet. My big break came when I helped the owner of a local accounting firm recover data from what they thought was a fried server. They'd been quoted thousands by a big IT company for the job. I fixed it in an afternoon for a few $100. The owner was so impressed he hired me on a monthly retainer to manage all their IT needs. That was my first real business contract. But slowly, things started coming together. Word of mouth spread. One satisfied customer would recommend me to another. I hired my first employee at 20, this community college kid who knew his way around networks. By 22, I had an actual office space with 3 employees. Now I have a team of 5, including a full-time office manager who handles all the stuff I hate dealing with. The best part of building my own business wasn't even the money. It was the control. For the first time in my life, I was making my own decisions, setting my own rules. Nobody could ship me off, or take my room away, or tell me I didn't matter. I was building something that was completely mine. Meanwhile, from the little I heard, Emma, now 27, was still living at home with Olivia, now 10. She dropped out of community college after one semester because it was too much with a child. Tyler had been in and out of their lives, mostly borrowing money and disappearing for months at a time. Every now and then, I'd get updates via holiday cards, or the occasional call from Dad. Apparently, Tyler got another girl pregnant when Olivia was 3, which caused drama for a while. Then he went to jail for a few months for driving on a suspended license with an unregistered gun in the car. Quality guy? That Tyler. Emma had this pattern of getting jobs and quitting, or getting fired within a few months. Retail, waitressing, receptionist. Nothing ever stuck. She always had excuses. The manager was mean, the hours were too long, the customers were rude. But from what I could tell from Dad's careful comments, the real issue was that she just didn't want to work. Why should she? When my parents were there to bail her out. On Olivia's 7th birthday, I sent her a tablet preloaded with educational games and ebooks. It was probably more expensive than I should have spent, but I wanted her to have something really nice. A few days later, I got a text from Emma with a photo of Olivia holding the tablet, but the message was just, "She says thanks for the iPad." It wasn't even an iPad, but whatever. No personal thank you from Emma, no acknowledgement of the effort I'd made to pick out age-appropriate content, just the bare minimum. I tried not to let it bother me, but it did. Not because I wanted gratitude, but because it showed that nothing had changed. Emma was still the same selfish person she'd always been, and my parents were still enabling her behavior. My parents, now 53 female and 55 male, were basically raising Olivia while Emma worked part-time at a nail salon and went out with friends. Mom was still making excuses for her, calling her a young free spirit who needed time to find herself. Dad sounded more and more tired on the rare occasions when we talked. The last time we had a real conversation, Dad mentioned that he was pushing back his retirement because they were still helping Emma get on her feet. He was 55 then, with back problems and high blood pressure. Should have been thinking about winding down his career, not supporting his almost 30-year-old daughter and granddaughter. I kept in minimal contact. Christmas cards, birthday texts, that's it. I sent Olivia birthday and Christmas gifts each year, usually books or educational toys. I'd never met her in person, which was weird to think about. I had a niece I'd only seen through screens. Grandma and Grandpa were still my real support system. They never made me feel like a burden or an afterthought. Grandpa passed 2 years ago, heart attack, peaceful in his sleep, and that hit me hard. Harder than anything I'd felt about my immediate family in years. I still call Grandma twice a week and visit for Sunday dinner whenever I can. The day of Grandpa's funeral was one of the worst days of my life. My parents came down, but Emma didn't, claimed she couldn't find a sitter for Olivia, which was bullshit because my parents could have watched her. The truth was she just didn't want to make the effort. My grandpa, who had basically saved me when my own family threw me away, wasn't worth a 6-hour drive to her. At the funeral, my mom tried to make it about her somehow, crying dramatically and telling everyone how her father had been such a wonderful man, as if she hadn't barely called him or visited over the past decade. Dad at least seemed genuinely sad, and he helped a lot with the practical arrangements, which I appreciated. After the funeral, I overheard Mom telling one of Grandma's friends that they were so worried about how I was coping with the loss, and how they'd offered to have me come stay with them for a while, which was a complete lie. They'd done nothing of the sort. That was Mom for you, always performing for an audience. On my 23rd birthday, I got a text from Emma that just said, "Happy B-Day, bro." No capitalization, not even my name. I hadn't heard from her directly in over a year. About an hour later, she sent another text asking if I could loan her $800 for car repairs. I ignored it. She sent 3 more messages over the next week, each getting progressively more guilt-trippy, until the final one accused me of abandoning the family and not caring about my niece's safety, since she needed a reliable car to drive Olivia to school. I finally responded with, "Ask Tyler or mom and dad. They're your support system, remember?" She didn't text again after that. That's the thing about people like Emma. They only remember you exist when they need something from you. 10 years of basically no contact, and suddenly I'm supposed to hand over money because we're family? The audacity was almost impressive. Meanwhile, I was building a life I was proud of. My business was growing steadily. I had good friends, dated occasionally, nothing serious, but not for lack of trying. I was happy, genuinely happy, in a way I never had been growing up. Sometimes I think about the parallel universe where my parents had stood up to Emma, where they'd made her and Tyler figure out their own living situation instead of shipping me off. Would I be the same person? Would I have built the same life? It's impossible to know, of course. But part of me thinks that being forced to rely on myself at such a young age made me stronger, more determined. It's not a silver lining I would wish on anyone else, but it's something I've made peace with. Then out of nowhere, my phone rang with Mom's number on a Tuesday afternoon. I almost didn't answer but figured it might be important. "Your sister was in a car accident," Mom said, her voice shaking. "She's okay, but she broke her leg in 3 places and fractured her hip. The doctors say she can't work for at least 6 to 8 months." I waited knowing there was more coming. And Tyler left for good. He said he couldn't handle the pressure and moved to California with some girl he met online. We're struggling with the medical bills and taking care of Olivia. Your father's hours got cut back at work, and my arthritis is getting worse. Her voice trailed off before she finally said what she was calling for. "We were hoping maybe you could come visit, reconnect with the family, meet Olivia properly. Your father really misses you." Translation: the golden child is down for the count, her deadbeat baby daddy is gone for good, and they suddenly remembered they have another kid who might be useful. I sat there for a long time after hanging up, just staring at my phone. 10 years. It had taken 10 years and a financial crisis for them to reach out in any meaningful way. Not because they missed me or regretted what they'd done, but because they needed something from me. Part of me wanted to ignore the call, but then I thought about Olivia, a 10-year-old kid caught in the middle of all this adult dysfunction. None of this was her fault. And if I'm being completely honest, a tiny part of me wanted them to see what I'd become without them. I wanted them to know that the kid they'd tossed aside had built a life they now needed to turn to for help. So I called Mom back and said I'd come visit in a few weeks. I booked a hotel rather than staying at their house. No way was I sleeping on their couch or in what used to be my room. Walking into my old house was weird. Family photos lined the walls, mostly Olivia at different ages, with Emma and my parents. I noticed there were only 2 photos of me, my high school graduation and one ancient school picture from when I was about 12. My old bedroom was now a princess-themed kids' room with pink walls and unicorn bedding. Emma was on the couch, leg in a cast, scrolling through her phone. She barely looked up when I walked in. "Oh, you actually came," she said, like she was surprised I could be bothered. Mom hovered around nervously while Dad hugged me tight and whispered, "I've missed you," in my ear. He looked so much older, so beaten down. When Olivia came home from school, everything changed. She was bright and curious with none of Emma's attitude. After a shy start, she lit up when she found out I worked with computers and bombarded me with questions about coding and games. That night after Olivia went to bed, they finally got to the point. They were drowning in medical bills. Emma couldn't work. Tyler was gone. They were behind on the mortgage and Olivia's private school tuition. "We know it's a lot to ask," Mom said, "but you're doing so well with your business. We were hoping you might be able to help us out." Emma finally looked interested in my existence. "Yeah, bro, must be nice having all that freedom and money." I looked around at all of them. My entitled sister, who never faced consequences, my enabling mother, who always put her first, and my passive father, who never stood up for me, but at least seemed genuinely sorry. "I'll help," I finally said. Mom burst into tears of relief. "But I have conditions," I continued. "I'm not giving anybody a blank check. I'll pay for Olivia's basic expenses and medical bills, directly to the providers, not to any of you. And the money goes through Dad, not either of you," I said, looking at Mom and Emma. Emma's smile vanished. "What? You don't trust us or something?" "No, actually, I don't. Mom looked offended, but Dad just nodded, understanding completely. That's fair, Dad said. You have no reason to trust us. I also insisted Emma enroll in job training once she was physically able. She stormed out, but Dad surprised me by agreeing it was more than fair. As I walked out to my car that night, Dad followed me. I should have stood up for you back then, he said quietly. It was easier to just go along with your mother and Emma. I've regretted it every day since you left. I just nodded. I wasn't ready to forgive him yet, but I appreciated the acknowledgement. Take care of Olivia, I said. She deserves better than all this drama. As I drove back to my hotel, I realized I didn't hate them anymore. I just felt sorry for them. They'd created this mess with their favoritism and enabling, and now they were living in it. Meanwhile, I was free, the forgotten son who built himself from nothing. Maybe someday I'd have a real relationship with Olivia, maybe even with Dad. But for now, them finally acknowledging they needed me after years of making me feel worthless, that was enough. Edit. Wow. Thanks for all the awards and comments. To clear up the timeline, I'm 24 now. I was 14 when I got sent to Florida. Emma was 17 when she got pregnant, and now she's 27 with a 10-year-old daughter. Edit 2. Some people are asking for updates. Yes, I'm still helping with Olivia's expenses, but only through my dad. Emma is still not working even though doctors cleared her months ago. She's been looking into online classes for like 6 months now. My mom still makes excuses for her. The good news is that I'm developing a relationship with Olivia. We video chat once a week and talk about books and coding. She's really smart, and I'm trying to be the person I needed when I was her age. Edit 3. To the people saying I should just cut them all off completely. I get where you're coming from, believe me. But Olivia is innocent in all this, and I don't want to punish her for her mom's mistakes. And no, I didn't move back. I visit occasionally to see Olivia and Dad, but my life is in Florida now. Edit 4. Thanks for all the kind comments and messages. This blew up way more than I expected. To those asking if I'd take Olivia if something happened to my parents, in a heartbeat. She deserves a chance at a normal life. To everyone sharing similar stories, I'm sorry you went through that, and I hope you found peace like I'm trying to. Edit 5. Last update because this is getting huge. A lot of you are asking if my grandma knows I'm helping my parents financially. Yes, she knows, and she supports my decision to help Olivia, though she has choice words about my sister that I won't repeat here. Grandma is a wise woman who taught me that sometimes being the bigger person doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. It means setting boundaries while still doing the right thing. Miss you, Grandpa. Wish you could see the man I've become.